I need you more. RPG! RPG! RPG!
I am strong.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Knights of Last Call. It is February 7th, 2023. I am Derek Melinda. We got a bunch of re-ups. We've got Henry becoming strong. We've got John becoming strong as they re-up for 6 months and 10 months respectively. Thank you, John. Thank you, Henry. How the hell is everybody doing tonight? I want to say welcome. Welcome to tonight's episode, brought to you by the Knights of Last Call patrons, who, of course, support this channel with their generous monthly contributions. And we literally 100% would not be here. We're not like other channels that can survive because we get so many views and sponsorships. We have zero sponsorships. I don't know that we'll ever get a sponsorship. And we make about $100, $150 a month from YouTube. So, that means I rely on our patrons who come in here. They support the channel with their tips and their super chats and their YouTube memberships, and of course with their Patreon memberships. So thank you so much. And in part and parcel with that, I put it up to them today as a poll. What would you like to see for today's topic? And yeah, I'm not like other girls. And this was not one that I put up, but my poll had add an entry. And Darth Gorlock, hero extraordinaire, GM extraordinaire, I should say. Darth Gorlock went ahead and added Blades in the Dark to the poll, and it won. So that brings us to where we're at tonight. Let's see what's going on. So I want to get that out of the way first. Say hello and welcome to everybody who's here. There we go. Frostjack has been looking forward to this, been meaning to look into Blades in the Dark for ages. Happy February to you, Frosty. Glad to see you. Been having a blast mucking about on the Discord all day. Yeah, it's been, Ben is in Connecticut. And so while the cats are away, or the cat is away, I should say, the mice will play. Trevko says, liking one, meaning, of course, Phyrexia, all will be one in the new Magic the Gathering set. So far, after one draft. Have not played it yet. I've watched a couple of Newmont the Nummy streams. I was watching, who was I watching? I think I was watching Martin Yuza play some streams the other day. So it looks like it's a very fast, aggressive deck. I don't know. I was thinking maybe I'll do some arena drafts. We'll see. I think I have some gems still on arena. It's been a minute. I haven't really played since, I think Strixhaven or Adventures in Forgotten Realms. It's been a couple of minutes. So yeah, welcome. So, that's it. That's all I had to really talk about, in terms of getting it out of the way today. And of course, if you want to keep, if you want to keep supporting us and you want to be a part of the action, feel free to join our Patreon. There's a link in the description below, patreon.com/knightsoflastcall. We'd love to have you join us and, maybe hang out with us and keep these conversations going. We've got a couple of people messing around with some Blades in the Dark games. We've got some people hacking Blades in the Dark and Pathfinder 2. So if you like what you what you see today and you want to see more of it, consider checking out our Patreon. And we have a couple tip goals as well today. Super chats will just show your love, and a tip goal will show is support for Blades in the Dark. So if we can get some progress on that tip goal, maybe we'll do an additional stream around Blades in the Dark. So, Boothby has to catch the VOD later. The barbells won't lift themselves. You know, Boothby, one of the things I love about having my new home gym, although I haven't fully slotted into sort of the workout mode yet, which I do want to, I need to, is I can just go in there and just bang out a few sets randomly. So I've had I think I have 165 or something, 170 on my barbell. And I just go in there and I just, I do a set of, 5 or 8, and I rack it and I come back to it. Whenever I'm feeling, saucy about it, I just hop in there and I just bust out a set. I work from home. I'm basically home all the time. It's actually really nice. Anyways, sorry about that, everybody. I usually just wait a few minutes for people to come in here in the beginning as well. Frostjack, I should hang out on the Discord more again. I've been super busy with my brother's wedding and setting up my own campaign. Well, those are both very good reasons to be busy, Frostjack, and I can't hate on you for that. to each their own. It can be a time suck. I'm the first to admit that. Frosty needs their Northern Reaches fix. They're starting to lose it. Frosty, it is coming. I know that Smith has been sort of dropping a few previews in the Northern Reaches channel. He's certainly been filling up Bob and I's private KOLC channel with some information about stuff that he's working on. We have to get to the sort of first draft, and then we will move into that. And I'm looking for. I think it's going to be pretty fun. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it as well. It was a pretty crazy time when the Northern Reaches starts. We tend to get a lot of growth. We get a lot of new people in the door, and that can be fun. It can also be a little bit stressful. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right. No comment on death. It's how do I say it? It matters more and it matters less. I'll say that. Hey, there he is. Darth Gorlock is here. I've been waiting forever for the Blades in the Dark stream. And indeed, Darth Gorlock has. So, Blades in the Dark. So, I don't want to spend too much time teaching you how to play Blades in the Dark. I do want to cover sort of the basics of it, and I want to, so we can at least, be talking the same language. Hopefully we won't have to bust out any whiteboards, but I definitely do want to cover how Blades in the Dark works, why it works, and kind of look into what the game does well and why I think the game is so incredibly fun and easy to run as a game master, and why I have had such a fantastic time playing in it. So first off, what is Blades in the Dark? Well, Blades in the Dark is it's a role-playing game. It is written by John Harper. This is the classic book. It's one of those A7 size books, and John Harper says that this book is a Powered by the Apocalypse hack. It does not look like a lot of other Powered by the Apocalypse games that you're probably used to playing, because it doesn't use 2d6 plus stat. It doesn't use the 6 minus. It doesn't use all that stuff. But it has a similar philosophy. And what I mean by that is the philosophy of Blades in the Dark is around this idea of 3 outcomes from any serious dice roll, which is to say that a hero, or I should say a PC or a player, can succeed, they can partially succeed, or they could fail. And in all 3 of those instances, including failure, the game is designed for something to happen. So even on a failure, the consequences of failure are never you didn't get to climb to the top of the wall. That is not kind of not a possibility in this game. It doesn't exist. There will always be some sort of mechanical function that
Darth
is associated with action.
$5.
Hey, Darth.
Just tipping my hat to the bit stream. Carry on.
Well, thank you very much for the tip. Appreciate it. So especially since you've been asking for it so much. And by the way, as Darth Gorlock there threw that tip out, feel free, as we kind of get into the nitty gritty about this, if you have questions and you want them answered about Blades in the Dark, you let me know. That's what this stream is for. It's for you. This is sponsored and funded by the patrons. I love our tip goals. The members of these streams help us out tremendously with these tips and super chats. Those are fantastic, but this really is for you. So like in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, in a Blades in the Dark game, you can either succeed, partially succeed, or fail. And in all 3 of those instances, something is going to happen. There is going to be consequences. There's going to be changes in the fictional world and in the mechanics of the game. So to that end, I kind of want to talk about, let me find this here. Okay. So I want to talk about the core rule set for Blades in the Dark. Okay. And that is the action roll. And again, I don't want to spend a ton of time teaching you how to play this. Thank you for the super chat, Ryan. Contributing towards the future Blades in the Dark stream and sending you the dollar value of the Heart PDF. 2 birds, 1 super chat. Yeah, Ryan knows that I just recently picked up Heart and Spire and has been saying we should do a first look on those. And of course, when I do a first look, it's convenient to have the PDF. But I just bought the hardcover book, and I was like, I don't know if I want to buy the PDF. So Ryan is graciously fronting the cost of that. Ryan, thank you very much. That is a great first look because I have nothing. I don't really know what to expect. It's a fairly new game. I think it'll be fun to dig into, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. So I look forward to that. Thank you so much for your contribution, sir. So again, I don't want to really teach you how to play Blades in the Dark, but it's important that we understand how this game operates and how this game works. So fundamentally, in Blades in the Dark, you are going to build a dice pool of D6s. Some of those D6s are going to depend on how good your character is at a particular action. If your character is very sneaky, they might get 3 dice when you're trying to sneak. If your character is particularly strong or violent, they might get 3 dice when they want to wreck something. Okay? So the first thing we do is we kind of get together a pool of these D6. And then we're going to roll them. And we are going to try to find in that pool of rolled D6 the highest value that we rolled. In other words, are there any 6s? No. Well, then are there any 5s? Okay, no. Are there any 4s? No. And so on and so forth down the line. In other words, we're looking for what's the highest die that we rolled. Now, let's see. Do we have a good one here? Okay, that's right here. All right. That is going to determine for us whether, kind of like in Powered by the Apocalypse, that's going to determine, did we succeed? Did we fail? Or did we succeed with some, a partial success? All right. But Blades in the Dark has something that Powered by the Apocalypse doesn't have. And one of the things that Blades in the Dark does very well, in my opinion, is it promotes a conversation between the players and the GM about exactly what is going on in the game at that minute and at that moment. And that is because of 2 things called position, up here in the upper left, and effect. You could think of these as like an X-Y axis, okay? Position is simply a measure of understanding in mechanical terms how risky your action is. In other words, it asks us if we fail, if we don't accomplish what we're setting out to do, okay? How bad are the consequences? I think we can all understand that there are inherently some actions or some situations where the consequences for actions are much greater, okay? If, in simpler terms, if we are, walking across a very wide balance beam, and there's no wind and there's no pressure, you might even say, assuming you're reasonably athletic, that this is a fairly controlled situation. It's not unlike walking down the sidewalk. Okay. On the other hand, if that balance beam is suddenly a tightrope, and suddenly the wind is blowing, and suddenly the people are shooting at you, okay, we can understand that the situation has become much more desperate. And should we fail, the consequences are going to be that much more severe. So the important thing to realize here is that position is about categorizing or classifying with you and your GM how dangerous a situation is. And this is part of the conversation that happens with every check in Blades in the Dark. Players are going to describe to the GM what their character is going to do. And the GM is going to respond and say, well, I think that sounds like a risky situation. And the player might respond with, well, I don't know. I mean, I know where he's going to be. I know where my target is going to be. And I made sure that we bribed the city watch so that no one would be around to see us when we try to, I don't know, rob this guy or mug this guy. And we bribed the bartender so that he would be, kind of drunk or drugged when he stumbles out of the bar. And the GM goes, you know what? That's a great point. I didn't really think about it that term. You're absolutely right. This is a controlled situation. Now the GM gets the final say, but that conversation, that back and forth, that is an important part of the game. So whenever you make an action roll in Blades in the Dark, the first thing you need to do is to understand what is my character's position in this. And, you could think of the scale of risk as being infinite, but for game purposes, the game makes it pretty simple, and it boils it down to 3 different categories: controlled, risky, and desperate. So when your character is way in over their head, then they are in a desperate situation. Whereas if your character is very much in their sort of wheelhouse, then they are in a controlled position. And risky is right in the middle. And Darth Gorlock says a great point, which is this tells you a lot about the nature of the game when you realize that risky is the default position. And that's because this is a game about, daring action. Now, there are a lot of variations of this game. This is Blades in the Dark, but there's also like Band of Blades, which is sort of like fantasy Navy SEALs and military operations. And there's Scum and Villainy, which is, very much Firefly, Millennium Falcon, Han Solo-esque, right? All 3 of these games sort of are based around the idea that your character is, kind of a scoundrel, kind of a risk taker. And so the base assumption of the game is if we're rolling the dice, it's probably because your character is doing something probably fairly risky. Otherwise, there's probably not a reason to roll the dice. So let's dig into this a little bit because I really want to dive into this. Okay. So I said before that you're going to assemble a dice pool and you're going to roll it and you're going to look for the highest value from your dice pool. Now, what you'll notice here as you look at this, results is you can see that if you roll a 6, no matter if it's desperate, risky, or controlled, it just says you do it, which means, guess what? You succeeded. The only difference, which means that no matter how desperate or bad your situation is, or no matter how much your character is in control of the situation, if you can manage to roll a 6 out of that pool of D6s, you do it. There's no consequences. Good job. The only way that these are different is what happens if you don't roll a 6. So in the course of the game, there essentially are 3 levels. You can roll a 6. There's 4. I'm going to ignore critical hits. Critical hit basically means you roll 2 6s or more. So if you roll 3 6s, 2 6s, that's a critical, but we can kind of ignore that for purposes of our discussion today. But if you roll a 6, you do it. You get away with it, no consequences. In Powered by the Apocalypse, this is your 10 plus. And if you're a math nerd like I am, and you go and you do a bunch of math and you do a bunch of stuff, you will realize that the odds of getting a 6 out of a pool of dice is kind of roughly equivalent to getting a 10 or higher out of Powered by the Apocalypse game. So it really is kind of a different way of sort of doing the same thing. The second option is 4 or 5. That means if the highest die in your pool is a 4 or a 5, this is where you succeed. Okay? This is where you succeed, but there's a catch. This is what we call in Powered by the Apocalypse a soft hit, or we call it a partial success. Your character succeeds, but maybe they don't succeed as well as they wanted to. Or maybe your character succeeds just fine, but there's an unforeseen complication or an unforeseen consequence. You did it, but there was a drawback. If the highest die that you roll is a 1, 2, or a 3, this is your character did not succeed and things have gone badly for you. But instead of the result being and nothing happens, like a traditional D20 game, if you try to hit someone with your bow and arrow, if you try to pick the lock, if you try to climb the wall, if you try to learn what something, what some riddle or runes are, and you roll the dice and you don't succeed, the 9 times out of 10, maybe 19 times out of 20, the response from the game is you failed, you didn't do it. What happened? Nothing happened. But in Blades in the Dark, like Powered by the Apocalypse, you have a situation where if you do roll a 1 to a 3, something's going to happen. It just might not be good for your character. In fact, almost certainly it is not going to be good for your character. And so it's not a situation where nothing is the result. You will always get something happening, even if it's something that you don't like. But if we take a look at these, we can see that if we're in a controlled situation, okay, and this means that we have all the, all the chips are on our side of the table, right? We have everything going for us in our corner. If we roll a 1, 2, or a 3, which means we failed, right? It says here, we falter. We can press on by seizing a risky opportunity, or we can withdraw and try a different approach. So when we're in a controlled situation, even if we fail, nothing really bad happens for us, right? Instead, the game gives us 2 choices. We can either press on, but the situation gets a little bit riskier, or we can completely withdraw and we can try something entirely new. Like, all right, imagine that your character has a rifle, like a black powder gun, and you're waiting in a bell tower with perfect cover to, snipe a political target down on the street. And you've mapped this out and this character's route. Maybe this is the character that we talked about earlier that was getting drugged in the bar. The GM and you both agree your character is totally in a controlled situation, right? Your gun's propped up on the, on the railing. You have complete cover. You're totally in control here. So the time comes to make the big shot. Somehow, some way, you roll your dice, and the highest number you get out of all those dice is only a 3. This means that we have triggered this highlighted set of rules text here. We falter. So what happened? Well, this is where the fiction comes back in. The GM might say, oh, just as the character is coming around the corner, he gets stopped by or maybe a horse breaks free of its cart, or it suddenly starts to rain, or a group of children run in front of your shot, right? Suddenly you realize you're not gonna be able to get the shot. That perfect moment has lapsed. And so the GM gives you an option. They said, okay, well, you could press on by seizing a risky opportunity. Okay, you could still take the shot, but you're gonna have to leave your sniper nest, go out onto the roof, get down to the roof's edge so that you can shoot him now as he's making his way further down the block. You're exposing yourself to more risk. Somebody might see you. You might fall off the roof. Maybe this guy has bodyguards. But either way, if you want to, you can keep trying to shoot this guy, but it's no longer to be that perfect controlled situation, right? The stakes have suddenly escalated, and now it is a risky situation. And we're going to roll again, but on the risky table. Or you might decide, you know what? I'm going to withdraw and try a different approach. This is the PC's option of saying, I missed the perfect shot, and okay, I'm going to, uncock my gun, and I'm going to, have to think about a different way. Okay, this is not the day that we're going to take this guy out. We have to think of a new way to get this guy. So this is a situation that you're in when you're in a controlled situation, that even if you fail, the player has a lot of agency over what happens to them. However, alternatively, if we're in a desperate situation and we roll a 1 to a 3, it's the worst outcome. Our character will suffer severe harm, or a serious complication occurs, or you lose this opportunity for action entirely. I should note that the GM can do any or all of these things, and I typically like to tell the player ahead of time what the outcomes will be should their character fail. I don't want it to be a surprise. I want them to know what risk they are taking when they go to make this action. But the real strength of this is that you and the player, or the players, get to have this conversation about understanding your fictional world. And by just assigning a position of controlled, risky, or desperate, you immediately set the tone and you set the stage in everybody's mind for how risky is this action. Okay? That's position. The other part is effect. Okay? Effect, in D&D terms, effect is damage. But keep in mind that this action rule is used for everything in the game. It's used for shooting a guy in the street. It's used for jumping from rooftop to rooftop. It's used for breaking down a wall. It's used for everything. Effect is the game's way of saying, okay, you want to do this action, and the GM is going to look at the circumstances in the fiction, and they get to say how effective they think that action is going to be. Do they think that you are going to have great effect, standard effect, or limited effect? Let me give you an example. The Marquis, who you are chasing down the hallways, suddenly spins around a corner. You hear a door slam, and as you round the corner, there's a hidden doorway behind the bookshelf that it's an escape tunnel, and he has made his way down it, and the door has sealed shut behind it. And your PC says, all right, I'm going to try to punch my way through this wooden door wall thing. And the GM says, yeah, I mean, it's thick wood. You're just punching this thing with your bare hands. I'm going to say that has limited effect, right? It's, even if you succeed, it's probably not going to be like the wall explodes into splinters, right? No, like, what would success, if someone was trying to punch through a thick wooden door with their bare hands, what would success look like? It would probably look like maybe, your characters are not necessarily superheroes, but they're larger than life a little bit. Yeah, you might be able to like punch a hole through the door, and maybe you could get to a latch on the other side if you're lucky. Or maybe you could at least get enough so that you could see where the Marquis was running off to. Does this tunnel keep going straight, or where is he headed? Are there other people back there? Are there guards? Right? But best case scenario, your character is limited. That's what limited effect means. Now, same situation. The Marquis slips through their bookshelf secret wooden hidden door, and your characters run up to it, and somebody says, the Marquis is escaping, we got to get to it. And you turn over to your big bruiser guy, and he pulls out a massive iron crowbar that he keeps on him for just such an occasion, or for cracking skulls. And he says, no problem, I got this. And he wedges it into the door frame, between the frame and the wooden door, and he just breaks it open. Well, what is that? Is that standard effect? Is that great effect? I don't know. The game doesn't know either. But what is going to happen at your table is you're going to have a conversation about this. All right? And some GMs might say, yeah, that has great effect. And other GMs might say that only has standard effect. But the point is, you and your players are going to have a conversation about what is the effect level. Now, ultimately, the GM does get final say. But if the GM says, I don't think that is enough, I think it's only standard, the player has the option to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that action. It's not like they are locked into doing something. If the GM finally decides that breaking down the door is, risky standard, then a player can say, I don't want to, let's try something else. Because I want to make sure that we get through this guy. And that's when maybe the alchemist pulls out a satchel of explosions and says, stand back, you know, and blows the door, and everybody goes, keep going, right? And the GM goes, hell yeah, okay, satchel of explosives, that's going to be great effect. And so as a GM and as a player, you can have through these three positions: controlled, risky, desperate, and these three effects, great, standard, limited, you have essentially a grid of 9 options to describe the circumstances and the effect of every action that you're taking in the game. And essentially what the game really boils down to is using your character's abilities, using the fictional reality around you in order to manipulate these positions and these effects into a story and into a way that's going to end up working out, hopefully, for you and your players, or I should say your fellow players. So position and effect are kind of everything in this game. You know, as an example, I don't know that this is the greatest thing, but like, this is like a helper sheet that somebody put on the internet. I don't know that it's really, really great, but let me see if I have. No, I don't have a better one than this one. But there's some tools. There's some really good GM tools in the book for helping you determine how effective a character should be. Because remember, everything in this game uses this position and effect role. There's no combat. There's no initiative. There's nothing. Everything uses this rule. So, for example, let's say that your character is a tough bruiser raised down on the docks, you know, maybe even a prize fighter who's been sort of in street brawls and fighting pits their whole life. If you get into a fight with somebody and the action, the role is, okay, Derek, I want to beat this guy into unconsciousness. And I say, that seems fairly reasonable. Okay, well, look, it's a fist fight. This guy isn't, this guy isn't laying on the ground comatose. So I think it's reasonable to assume that this is a risky action. If they were a nobody or some, just some punk kid or something, you might say it's controlled, but we'll say it's risky. And I'll say, you know what, you're a fantastic fighter. Maybe you have something on your character sheet that basically says that your character is a really good fighter. We're going to say that your success here is, your effect is great. So if you succeed, yeah, you beat the snot out of this guy, right? He's just unconscious, TKO, he's out. On the other hand, the book will say, well, look at some of the factors that are happening here. Maybe one of the factors could be the scale or the quantity of something. Let's put our same prize fighting tough guy. He rounds the corner and there's a squad of goons spilling out from the nearby bar. And they want revenge because they know that you just, the other day, you burned down his brother-in-law's, tractor supply company. And so there's like 5 guys, big guys, not trained guys, but there's 5 of them. And, we're not superheroes in this game. So 5 versus 1, the GM might say, yeah, you know what? Your effect here is going to be limited. Maybe it could be standard. Maybe that's a conversation that you and your players are going to have. And this is a sort of a hidden trick of the game. I know this is sort of an open discussion. And again, if you guys have questions or anything like that, please put them in the chat. But as a GM and as a player, you can control the tone of your characters. You could control the tone of your campaign by how you set position and effect. If our, kind of would-be street fighter boxer gets into a fight with 5 beefy guys from the local bar, and the GM tells you that is standard effect, they're kind of setting the tone here. They're saying, all right, you know what? 5 versus 1, but your character's kind of a badass. And you know what? They're going to have standard effect. Like, this is kind of a routine challenge for them. I'm not saying that's super heroic, but your character's a little bit more of a badass. On the other hand, if you say that the effect is limited, then you're also setting a tone with your players. You're sort of saying, look, I don't care that you're a really good fighter. It's 5 versus 1. And these guys aren't pushovers. So no matter how well you do, maybe, you knock one guy out. Maybe you really mess up another guy. But there's still going to be 3 guys left. And these aren't pushovers. These aren't chumps. You're going to be in kind of a rough spot in that situation. So again, this is where, as a player, and the GM, you have these conversations. So you're telling a lot about the players. The other thing, by the way, too, remember, no surprises, right? So 5 guys come out of let's just say the GM's kind of describing it. He goes, okay, you're like, I round the corner, I push my way through the bar. And he's like, okay, a couple of guys get up in your face and they get in your face. You go, you know what? I'm just going to push my way through all these guys. And I go, whoa, okay, your effect is limited. And the player goes, whoa, limited? Like, these are just 5 guys at the bar. And the GM goes, oh, yeah. Okay, I didn't really describe it well enough. These are like 5 muscle guys. They might be dressed like ordinary people at the bar, but from their size, their demeanor, these people might be like enforcers. They might be toughs. They might be street bravos who actually work for the marquee as sort of hired thugs or hired muscle. And the player goes, oh, okay. I get what you're saying. See, we weren't on the same page. And by explaining what the effect is, the player had a discontinuity. They thought, I thought the situation was here, and the GM is telling me the situation's up here. We're not on the same page. GM, hold on a sec. Can we reset? And so the GM says, no, these guys are super tough. And the player isn't priced into that action. They say, okay, in that case, maybe I'm not pushing through them. Maybe I'll try to, I don't know. You'll be like, whoa, okay, fellas. Listen, I think we got off onto the wrong foot here. I don't know, maybe you try to sweet talk them, or maybe you try to do something else. The point is that no one's holding a gun to your head, right? You're not forced to go through with a situation. You should understand what the position and effect is, right? You should know what the terms of the bet are before you roll the dice. You should never get, surprised by something. The GM, you should never go into a fight with somebody and then the GM suddenly goes, oh, surprise, your position is desperate and your effect is limited because this guy's actually secretly a really amazing fighter that you had no idea about at all. Like, that's just not the way the game works. It's not a gotcha kind of game. You as a player would understand that before you would go into making that roll. Nicholas, does Band of Blades use the same position and effect rules? Looked it up at my local gaming store website, and it seems like 2 different games, not only for the setting, but for the rules tool. No, Band of Blade uses position and effect as well, Nicholas. It is a different game. It does use a different type of thing. The mechanics for like how you play through the game is a little bit different, but fundamentally it is the same game. Mike says, hi, Derek. Hi, Mike. I'm only here because someone told me the water pressure rules are highly developed. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're super highly developed, but they're developed enough. Okay, so I want to talk about, these are the 2 main things I really want to talk about the action rules about Blades in the Dark. So the first thing is this position and effect lets the GM and the players have a conversation. It lets you have a conversation in very simple terms. There's 3 dials. Controlled, risky, desperate. And then there's 3 dials. Great, standard, limited. And the game mechanics and the fiction all reference these 3x3 things. And it means that we can describe things in a fictional way and then kind of put into parentheses, like, that means controlled, right? So we can speak in the narrative and then we can make sure that we are describing it in the rules so that everybody knows what's actually happening in the game. And that is so important because that increases player agency, because now you are making decisions and you understand what the consequences are, what there is to gain, what there is to lose. And that means that you're making an informed decision. The other thing, which we have not talked about, is how you can change these positions and effects. And remember, we're starting this off with a dice roll, okay? So one of the first things that you'll see here is when you roll your dice, when you're assembling that dice pool to roll, to determine if you get a 6 or if you get a 4. You get 1 dice for each action rating dot. Basically, for every rank that you have in Prowl or every rank that you have in Rec, if you go to do that type of action, you're going to get 1 die. But you can also see here that you gain an additional die if you have assistance. If one of your teammates helps you out, you get an additional die to your pool. Helping out isn't completely free in this game. It's not like 5th edition or Pathfinder 2. But, as a group, you could say, yeah, I'm going to assist you. I'm going to add a die. Additionally, you can add a second additional die or separately. So you can add up to 2 dice. You can get 1 die from somebody else. By the way, note, it's only ever 1 die. You can never add more than 1 die from assistance. Even if 25 people are helping you, you can only get 1 die. Alternatively, you can get a die if you push yourself or you accept a devil's bargain. So this is the other fantastic way that action rolls create fun and interesting elements within the game. So giving yourself more dice means it's increasing your chance of success. Now, you're either going to like this rule or you're going to hate this rule. Okay? Pushing yourself is simple and easy. In game terms, you take 2 points of stress and you get to add an extra die. In D&D terms, you take some hit point damage and you get to roll an additional die. But unlike D&D, stress is you never get a lot of it. You might only have 7 or 8 points of it, and it's not as easy to get back. And and if you run out, your character doesn't die. It's almost worse. Your character becomes traumatized. So in some ways, taking 2 stress to get an extra die is a lot. But the other way that you can get that extra die is by accepting a devil's bargain. And I think they have an example here. So here we go. These are just examples. And the game encourages the other players, the other GMs, the other players, the GM, to suggest devil's bargains. Okay? So, for example, devil's bargains are basically a form of quantum narration. We are going to create trouble or problem that didn't exist before our player decided to accept the devil's bargain. By the way, the player never has to accept the devil's bargain. Even if another player or GM suggests one, they could say, no, I'm not interested. I'm just going to go ahead and make the roll and I don't care about it. On the other hand, a player might say, guys, I think I need an extra die here. Does anybody have a suggestion for a devil's bargain? Or maybe the player has a suggestion for the devil's bargain for themselves. It's a kind of communal effort. It's an opportunity to stop for a moment and think, what is a way that we can make the narrative a little bit more troublesome, a little bit more problematic, so that that player gets that extra die? It's a way of sort of, it's like almost like taking a loan out. You're going to get an extra die right now, which is going to help you a lot in succeeding. But you're going to have to pay the piper down the line. Something is going to happen that's going to be a problem later on. So, for example, you can see here, offend or anger a faction. So maybe while your character is chasing through the marquee through the market streets, and he jumps into a bar, and the marquee goes right through it, and you go right into it, and then the 4 or 5 tough guys get in your way, and they say, whoa there, buddy. And you are with the rest of your PCs, and you say, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to knock these guys out really quick. I'm not trying to fight them. I'm not trying to make sure they're all down for the count. I just want to bowl over them. If a guy gets broken nose or broken teeth, okay, listen, sorry, buddy. But I'm not trying to kill anybody here. I just want them to get out of the way so we can keep chasing after the marquee. And the GM says, okay, but there's a lot of them. These are big guys. It's going to be pretty tough. And so the player says, boy, gee, I think I need an extra die. I think I want the devil's bargain. And the GM says, okay, how about this? You can get your extra die, but turns out that these these oafs in the bar who are giving you shit, they actually work for your primary weapon smuggler, or they actually work for your client, or they work for your enemy. They're actually on the payroll of an enemy gang that you are sort of going tip to toe with, and this is going to really, really piss that person off. And again, there's a faction system. This isn't just make-believe. This isn't just FBT, right? Fluffy bullshit time. You might have us, there's a faction chart that shows how much does a faction like us and how much does a faction hate us. And the GM might say, I'm going to push this faction rating, whether you succeed or fail, I'm going to push this faction rating one tick closer to, you know, Street War, because now you're going around beating up their guys. And the player goes, okay, that is acceptable, totally fine, give me the extra die, and we roll it and we keep going on with the story. Now, regardless of what happens in this one sort of scene of us chasing down the Marquis, right? Maybe he owes us money or something, or maybe he has, we were hired to get his ducal or his Marquis signet ring because somebody wants it for some reason. Or maybe he's got some sort of secret note and we were hired to get it off of him, and things have gone really south. By the way, remember, we started back at his palace. He got away from us somehow, started racing for the secret door behind his bookhouse. Now we find ourselves out on the street racing through bars and alleyways. Anyways, things have clearly gone off the rails here. But, right, regardless of what happens with this score and this mission, we have sort of planted a seed. The GM and all the players at the table know that we have sort of planted a seed of trouble that is going to be an issue for another day, okay? And the players are going to realize that wasn't because of something the GM, I mean, maybe the GM suggested it, but when I suggested that maybe these toughs work for their nemesis, that might not have been the GM's suggestion. That might have been another player at the table's suggestion. Additionally, you can see that there's a ton of options, and this is just a small list of options. As long as the group feels that the devil has been paid, then you can get your bonus die. So, again, collateral damage, betraying a friend or a loved one. Maybe there's an opportunity to catch up with a bunch of people that you're after, and you end up having to like firebomb. I don't know, firebomb. You're in Blades in the Dark. You're kind of criminals. Maybe you get hired to do arson, and as you're about to do the arson, and you say, "I want an extra die." Does anybody have a suggestion? And then somebody suggests, "Oh, what if that lady that we're really friendly with? What if her shop is next door, and it's going to burn down too?" She might suspect it's us. Maybe she knows it's us, but that's life in the life of a criminal or a scoundrel, right? If you've ever watched any sort of criminals, story, Breaking Bad or Ozark or whatever, you know that these things happen all the time in these stories, and it's what sort of plants those seeds that later in the season, sometimes later in the episode, but sometimes later in the season or several seasons later, come back to kind of bite the characters in the ass, right? So the Devil's Bargain is a fantastic way to, as a group, sort of say, you know what? I want to succeed. I want extra dice. This is important to me. This is important to our group. I want to have control over what happens in our game. And Blades in the Dark gives you tools, a lot of tools in order to do that. We didn't really get into the math too much, but needless to say, I mean, look, there might be complications, but if you get a 4 or greater, that means if you get a 4, a 5, or a 6, you succeed. Yes, if you get a 4 or 5, you succeed with some complications. But if you get a 4, 5, or 6, you succeed. That means with even just one die in your die pool, you have a 50% chance of succeeding. If you go to 2 dice, you now have a 75% chance of succeeding. If you go to 3 dice, you have something like an 88% chance of succeeding, right? Like you go to 4 dice, it's like a 96% chance of succeeding. So getting an extra die or 2 is a huge amount of assurity that you're going to succeed. But the way that the game balances this is that in order to get those extra dice, you're going to have to do things like take stress, or take a Devil's Bargain. And that's going to keep the game flowing forwards. All right. So that is how position and effect work. What else? Oh, okay. The other thing I want to talk about, consequences. So if we look over here on the left, we could see that if we don't get a 6, if we get a 4 or a 5 or a 1, 2, or a 3, and a 4 or 5, we do it. Okay. We do it. Okay. But there's a complication. There's a consequence. Okay. And you can see that there's a bunch of different types of consequences. We might suffer harm. Our character might get a broken leg or a bruised ribs, punched in the mouth, knocked out. Right? Our character can suffer harm. We could have a complication that occurs, right? We succeed, but everybody saw us. I shot the guy, I assassinated him, but somebody had a video camera on the grassy knoll, and they got video footage of me doing it. Oh no, we have somebody who's seeing us, right? We could succeed, but not be as successful as we wanted to be. We shot the guy, he's bleeding out, but he's not dead yet. So all of these things here in bold, reduced effect, suffering harm, a complication occurring, we end up in a desperate position. These are all consequences listed here. And these are just an example of the consequences that are sort of mechanically stated, but these could be anything in the fiction that happens as a result of your character not rolling a 6. You might succeed and get a complication on a 4 and 5, or you might just get a consequence on a 1, 2, or 3 and not succeed at all. But regardless of the consequence that your scoundrel takes, whether it's reduced effect, a complication, a lost opportunity, a worse position, or harm, your scoundrel can always choose to say, no, I am resisting this consequence. This is probably one of the strangest things about this game, and I think it's important to talk about it because I think it does something very important psychologically that it's difficult to describe, so I'm going to try my best to describe it, but it's I'm going to describe it in Pathfinder 2 terms first, or I should say D20 terms first. And then we'll come back to Blades in the Dark. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to use this as a D20 example. This is something that I have thought about doing before, but have never done. In D20, we roll the dice, the D20, to determine if our character hits. And then, after rolling to see if our character hits, we roll the damage die to see how much damage they take. Okay? Pretty standard. And the GM will do this back to the players, right? I'll roll for my monster's attack roll, and then I will roll the damage. Now, I think we've all been there before, where the GM is rolling the attack roll first. Maybe they're even rolling it out in the open. And you're really nervous because this is a big ogre and your hit points are kind of low. And the GM rolls a D20 and he rolls kind of high and it's a hit. And then, or vice versa, you're fighting the big ogre. You think it's almost dead. Everybody is watching your character as you pull out your greatsword and go to attack the ogre. Everybody's eyes are fixed on your D20 as you roll it. You get the hit. Everybody fist pumps. Then you roll the damage and you get like 2 damage or 3. And there's this weird kind of like let down moment. I have often wondered psychologically if it would be better to roll the damage first. Because what it does is it sets the stakes for the D20 roll. Right? We know not to get our hopes up on that D20 roll because we know that the damage roll is going to be low. Right? Or vice versa. If the damage roll is insane, right, it makes our sort of tension of what is the D20 roll going to be feel much more earned because we know what the outcome is going to be. So the way I compare it to is like the D20 roll is like a lotto ticket, but the damage roll is what is the prize. So you don't even necessarily know what if you're excited. Hey, welcome GM Rufus, new to the Patreon, and now an adventurer, bringing in his very, very sexy loyalty badge. Thank you, GM Rufus. Not only that, that sponsorship pushes GM Rufus to the hype boss. So, wow, that's a lot of stuff to happen from one encouragement. Well, GM Rufus, enjoy your loyalty badge, enjoy your extra emojis, and thank you for supporting Knights of the Last Call and being a member of the adventure. We definitely appreciate it. Thank you so much. So what was I saying? Yeah, okay. So I was saying that the damage roll is the lottery tickets winnings, right? So you scratch off the scratch off ticket and it says you win and you're super excited. And then you like turn it in to like the, lady behind the register and she says it's only worth $1. And you kind of go, well, I feel kind of ripped off. So in Blades in the Dark, the way that it works is if your character fails or if your character succeeds with a complication, a consequence, the GM is going to state what horrible bad thing just happened. Maybe your character suffers some sort of complication. Maybe your character ends up in a horrible position. Maybe your character ends up with a ton of harm, a broken arm, shattered pelvis, crushed skull. They leave that damage, they leave that consequence horrible and hanging out there. So that there's almost like this idea of like, it's almost like seeing the future. You could see just how bad it could have been. But in Blades in the Dark, a scoundrel, or I should say a player character, can always resist a consequence. And when a scoundrel resists a consequence, the consequence either goes away or becomes much less severe. And to do this, the character will make a resistance roll. And essentially what it comes down to is the character is going to take some of that stress we keep talking about, okay? Being a scoundrel is a pretty stressful life. Your character is going to accumulate stress whenever they deny a complication. And eventually this could create your character to have some sort of traumatic moment, which is kind of what keeps the game going. But what the important part about it is, it gives the players a feeling of empowerment. Your player characters in Blades in the Dark will never feel like they are on the waves of fate, the fickle rogue thing that happens. Because even if the dice went shitty, and even if the best roll they got was a 2, and even if the GM says, you know what? He kicks you in the chest. You go sailing off the edge of the building. You land with a thud on the street. Your brain cracks and you become a wet puddle on the cobblestone streets below. That's the consequence. And the player can say, no, not today. Resistance rolls are always successful. They are always successful, right? The only question is how much stress is it going to cost you? Okay? It is always, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of how much. This means that the player has control of their fate. The dice are still going to push you into places you don't want to be. Look, if you're making resistance rolls, you're going to be gaining stress. If you're gaining stress, things might be bad for you. Your character might gain some traumas, and that could be bad for your character. Eventually, even potentially essentially making your character retire. You could think of it as killing your character. But the important part here is the player is in control. Now, the price, they may not want to pay the price, but they always have that option. And this is, I think, a tremendously empowering thing in a role-playing game. We always talk about agency. And I think we all feel this way. I think when we play a lot of D20, we play Pathfinder 2 or 5th edition, you ever get that feeling that on your, it's the enemy's turn, they're attacking you, or they're throwing fireballs at you, and you're watching yourself get critically hit and tore apart, and you critically fail the save versus paralyze or slow, and you know that the rest of this fight is just going to be a complete total bore for you because you're only going to get one action a turn, or hell, maybe you won't even get actions because you're going to be paralyzed, or your character's now unconscious. And it's just, you feel, maybe this is just me, but I can feel powerless. I feel, yes, I understand that. I get on a logical level. I go, well, I did everything I could do to raise my saves to their highest values and get my armor class up. And and I think it's worse when you do those things, right? When your character goes, okay, I am going to this turn, smart. I am going to get within the aura of the circle of protection to give myself a +1 status bonus to my AC. And I am going to raise my shield to give myself a +2 circumstance bonus to my AC, thus raising my armor class by 3 points, which is about the most you can really easily raise your armor class in this game. And then like the monster comes in and like rolls an 18 or 19 and crits you anyways. And you're like, I feel worse now. Like, I don't want to feel worse. I want to feel better. So there's a strong psychological element to this that I think allows the characters who are playing this game to feel like I get some say in the matter. And like, I get it. It's not a free lunch. I'm paying a cost, but it's my choice whether I am going to pay that cost. And that, I think, gives people a lot of satisfaction, because if something horrible happens to you, you could always have paid the cost. You might choose not to. You might accept it and say, nope, this is a fine consequence. I'm willing to accept it. But the ability to step in and say, no, not today, I think is a tremendous victory for the game. Let's see here. Frostcheck says, I remember the Northern Reaches game I was in that you ran. You rolled to hit me, succeeded, rolled damage, and rolled high, but forgot the concealment check. So it felt so good when that was a failure. Right. Because like it was hanging out there, right? Like it's almost like you saw the future of how bad that damage could have been, but you had this one last opportunity to sort of resist it or dodge it or miss it. And it could feel very satisfying to do that in such a way. So for me, this is sort of the basic elements of a Blaze in the Dark game. Now, Blaze in the Dark kind of follows, they have this example in the book, and we use ink blots to show that this stuff is amorphous and isn't just, limited to one thing. But the way that a Blaze in the Dark game runs, some people have accused it of being board gamey, and I don't think it is at all. But the way the Blaze in the Dark game works is you spend a chunk of time in what's called free play. And this is where your character is interacting with the world around you. You are, for all intents and purposes, you're sort of in downtime. I know it says downtime next to it, but your character isn't on a mission. One of the things about Blaze in the Dark is whether it's a criminal score, or it's running the Kessel Run, or delivering the plans to the Death Star, or it's literally a mission to infiltrate an enemy encampment and destroy their logistical supplies. Blaze in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games work around this idea of sort of missions or scores or capers. That's sort of the fundamental nature of the game. And that is represented by the score phase. And in a score phase, your character is, in danger. You're at risk. You're fighting your way through the Death Star. You're, involved in a running gunfire, right? You're flying your spaceship to try to lose Imperial, attackers, right? So the score phase is sort of like the action phase, where we sort of zoom in on this sort of high-paced action. And your character's going to be making a lot of action rolls. Presumably, they're going to be maybe taking some consequences. They might be taking some stress. But they will either complete the score and get the payday that they were looking for, or they might not complete the score, and then that has its consequences too. And then after the score is done, there is a section of time, which they call downtime in Blaze in the Dark, which is very procedural. It is a mechanical, procedural element to the game. Why is it do this? This whole section here is just designed to push the game forward from a sandbox perspective, because Blaze in the Dark is never designed for you to have any sort of prep, in my personal opinion. And I would argue that the game doesn't think there should be prep either. This downtime phase is designed to sort of plant those seeds and lay those nuggets for the problems and the issues and the complications that your character and your fellow PCs are going to be getting into for sort of the next iteration of the game. And then we move into free play. And free play is basically everything that your character is doing when they're not on the job. It could be fluffy bullshit time. You guys are just hanging around, shooting the shit in character. It could be your character, trying to line up that next big score. It could be your character going and talking to maybe some corrupt police officials to find out when that shipment of, gold bars is scheduled to come in. And maybe you're making some bribes to see if you can find out, which warehouse they're going to be storing it at. And right, you're doing all the stuff that in the movies is sort of like the low tension stuff. It's not the music is pumping and the tension is really high. That's the score. The free play is everything in between until eventually the group says, okay, we've got an idea. We know what we want to do. We want to choose a target and we want to go after it. And then Blaze in the Dark says, we skip planning. Let's not pretend that let's not pretend that you or I are criminal masterminds. We're not. And it's kind of embarrassing to think that we are. And rather than try to imagine that we can account for every single thing that, a manor house or a warehouse would have for security or have for their guards. And then rather than having to create a map and figure out what every trap is and what every guard encounter is, let's just forget all of that and just make a single die roll. And if we roll high, then you guys got in and it's going really well. And if you rolled really low, then there was a problem and you got hung up on something. And we'll just make it up. What's not important is what the problem is. What's important is the die roll to determine if there was a problem. This is, again, something you'll either like or you'll hate. For me, I think it is tremendously freeing because what it means is you can just get to playing. You get to the fun part. You don't have to sit there and spend 2 or 3 hours. Now, here's the thing. I know people are going to say, but we like planning. That's cute. That really is. The truth of the matter is, when PCs plan like that, you're just playing make-believe, right? Like, you don't actually know what you're doing. And like, mostly what's happening most of the time, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. The GM is listening to you plan, okay? And then they're gonna like make things in the adventure, make it seem like your plans were really good ideas because they want you to feel better about yourself and not that you wasted all of your time with all of these silly contingency plans that, quite frankly, are probably never going to come up anyways. And then when something actually does happen that like a smart criminal would have planned for, your characters are just completely screwed because of course you didn't think about that because you're not real criminals. So Blaze in the Dark says, we're just going to skip all that nonsense and we're just going to get to the good part. We're going to assume that your characters are proficient the same way that I, the player, don't need to know how to handle a flintlock pistol or an Eruvian rapier, or I don't need to know how to, contact the spirit world in order to bind a ghost essence to my, soul. We just roll a die and I let the character sheet tell me what to do. This game says, look, for all that planning and all that other stuff, let's just assume our characters know what they're doing and let's just see how it's going. And you know what? Tell you what, since your characters are really, really awesome, cool criminals, we're even going to give you a ability in the game to spend some of that stress that you have available to you and say, you know what? Let's do a real quick flashback. Oh, as we're coming into the bar, we have this big plan. We're going to make our way through the bar. We're going to talk to everybody. Then we're going to get close to the marquee. And then boom, I'm going to pull out my double pistols and just shoot him dead for betraying us on that last job. And we're going to send a signal. And you're like, oh, okay, great. And everybody's got this whole plan. And everyone's like, you spend hours with this plan, right? And then because then the people go, well, how are we going to get out of there? And they go, okay, here's what we're going to do. And like the players spend hours and hours and hours with this plan about how they're going to shoot him and how they're going to get out. And they think about contingencies and they think about going out the back door and they think about going out the window. And then they're like, well, maybe we should secure the alleyway before we do the mission. And then like, they're just spending hours. And then as they go to the inn to meet the Marquis, at the door, one of his men goes, all your weapons, please. And pats you down and takes the guns off of you. And suddenly, like, the group is like, oh, shit. Yeah, no, we didn't think of that. Damn. Well, I guess all our planning was for nothing. But what you can do in Blades in the Dark is not do all that planning. Say, okay, GM, we got an idea. We're going to confront the Marquis at the inn. We're going to get close to him and blow him away. And GM says, that sounds pretty great. Let's roll an engagement roll. Okay, you rolled pretty normal. But there's a little bit of a problem as the mission starts. You come in, one of the bouncers walks up to you, pats you down and says, no weapons. And he takes both of your pistols off of you and puts them into a strong box. And the player goes, ah, shit. Okay, cool. It's a good thing we're playing Blades in the Dark. Derek, clearly my scoundrel is a kind of a badass here. Can I spend 1 point of stress to do like a flashback and show the previous night that my character actually paid the bartender to secretly put a pistol in the bathroom, like Godfather style, right? Like Michael Corleone about to do his first hit, and the gun is waiting there for me. So all I have to do is get to the bathroom, and then I'll have a new gun on me. And I go, that's totally reasonable. Your character's a badass. He would have done that. And you go, sweet, awesome. And then the game continues. Now, we're still playing. The player is still being forced to come up with ideas. They're still being forced to think on the spot. There might even be dice rolls to determine how well that goes. You know, maybe we make a dice roll to see like, well, hey, did anybody see the gun get planted? Like, are there going to be witnesses? Is there going to be a problem? Right. But the point is, Derek, didn't have to like think about the fact that maybe they would take my guns away. And now I've got to think about how am I going to plant it? Like, why do we want to waste hours and hours doing that? Now, there's some people out there, despite what I just said, who will say, I like doing that. And they're saying that, and most of the time they don't realize that like they're actually really bad at it. And it's kind of embarrassing, but you know, they like doing it anyways. They like playing make-believe. They like playing pretend that they're going to, be this great criminal mastermind. Okay, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to not to have fun, but Blades in the Dark skips all that, and it uses flashbacks to just very quickly let your character be skilled and proficient. And you spend some stress. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of Legend of Five Rings. You spend some stress, so it's not free. It's not like you're not just getting away with this. Everything still has a cost. You're still playing the game. And that's what makes it, so incredibly powerful and useful. So yeah, I mean, Blades in the Dark in that regard is so easy to run with little to no prep because you just boom, you just get into it. And you just start creating, obstacles as the dice rolls generate them. So a couple of things that I have learned from Blades in the Dark, though, is, and we've talked about this a lot on this channel, and that is the idea of clocks. So progress clocks are this simple idea of just tracking how much progress you have made towards a goal or how much progress another group has made towards a goal. And when it fills up, that thing becomes true. One of the things that you need to do in this game is understand there's two referential frames. The one referential frame is what is happening right now. What are the problems that our PCs are facing on this current score? And as you're playing through the game and they're making dice rolls to overcome challenges, they aren't always going to roll a 6, okay? And so if they roll a 4 or 5, there might be complications, okay? Complication. And you can see that one of the complications over here is represents trouble, mounting danger, or new threat. You could take heat, which is like the cops getting on your tail. You could lose status, or you could tick a clock. 1 tick for a minor complication, 2 ticks for a serious standard, 3 ticks for a serious. So what does this mean? Well, it means that, let's say we're in the score and we're trying to sneak in to this manor house to get to the safe so that we can get a document inside, which will maybe be something we can use for blackmail. We don't even maybe care about it. Maybe we're just paid to get this document. And the GM says, okay, look, there are some sort of guards in this palace, and I'm going to make a clock. And the clock, and this, when I'm playing at a table, this is exactly what I do. I decide, do I want this to be a something that is short, medium, or long? In which case it has either 4 segments, 6 segments, or 8 segments. And I'll take a note card and I'll write in a Sharpie at the top of it, like the alarm is raised, or I'll write the guards find you, right? I'm putting out there what is the danger. I'm sort of speaking it aloud. And then at the bottom, I'll draw a circle and I'll either quarter it or I'll sixth it or I'll eighth it, and I'll stick it down right in the middle of the table. I want everybody at the table to know that this is a potential problem. Right here, right now, in this score, in this mission, to infiltrate this manor house. Now, again, this is where you need to sort of keep your mind a little bit different. You're making these checks for these consequences. You have to understand that consequences that come from an action roll do not always have to be tied to exactly what that action was about. These are not simulationist consequences. These are narrative consequences. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that if we had our clock, which said the guards discover you, or the alarm is raised, and it had 6 ticks or 6 segments on it, you could be tempted, if you're thinking about it from a very simulationist standpoint, that the only time that you would tick that clock as a consequence would be if, say, the characters were trying to sneak somewhere, or maybe they were trying to break open a locked door. They succeed, right? You say, well, it's a little bit risky. You're trying to be quiet and you're on a mission. And let's say they roll a 4 or 5. So they do it. They get through the locked door, but they have a complication. And the complication is you're going to tick a clock. And so you come in here and you tick the clock twice. That is totally fine and totally acceptable. But a problem I see in this game is people do not think, they think about the current situation, but they don't think about the bigger situation. They don't think about the meta situation, the campaign situation. I know this is kind of confusing, so I'm going to try to keep talking and then you guys can ask me questions. I said before that when you get a consequence, it doesn't always have to relate to what is exactly going on in the score. A problem that I see a lot of GMs have is when you play a game of Blades in the Dark, the way the dice are set up, trust me on this, Powered by the Apocalypse is true, is if you're going to roll a lot of 4s and 5s, okay? That's a long way. Let me just say it that way. You're going to get a lot of, you do it, but there's a problem. You do it, but there's a complication. You do it, right, but there's an issue. So what this can create is a death spiral. Meaning the players just they never get above water, right? Like they succeed, but now there's a new problem. And then they go, okay, well, we're going to go try to tackle that problem. You're like, okay, well, you succeed at tackling that problem, but then there's another problem. And it just keeps spiraling and spiraling. And what ends up happening is like, scores can just go on forever because like new problems keep coming up, and the GM is trying to come up with all this crazy stuff that's going on in this manor house, and they're trying to think of all the ways that this thing could go wrong, and it gets blown way out of proportion. The players end up spending the whole session there, which is not what the game is intended to do. And the GM gets kind of frustrated because they say, well, my players kept rolling 4s and 5s, and I kept generating complications, and I kept ticking clocks, and those clocks kept, summoning the guards, and then they had to fight the guards, but then there was a clock for more guards, and then they got that, so then more guards came, and it just kept spiraling out of control. And that's because sometimes you need to think bigger picture, and you need to think not about the simulation. Sometimes the right choice isn't to tick the clock that is about the current mission or the current score. Sometimes the right consequence is to tick the clock that kind of has nothing to do with the current mission. Brain explodes, right? Because as much as clocks are useful in a score, the better use of clocks is as letting your players understand the landscape of your entire campaign. What I mean is clocks that represent the plans, the schemes, the motivations of some of the big NPCs or factions or political groups that are going on inside of your criminal organization. Like, for example, I might have a clock that is out there in the middle of the table. And maybe to help your players, you put it on a different color or a different size index card. Now, I talked about before about how in a mission, in a score, I might use one of these 4 or 6 or 8 segment clocks. Well, when I'm talking about like the big plans of big, the rival thieves guild, this is where I might use something like a 10 segment clock or a 12 segment clock. This is sort of like the multi-month or multi-year plans of your rivals. So the GM might have a clock out there on the table. And as players, you know about this clock. And at a certain level, your PCs do as well. And that clock might have 12 segments to it. And it says, the rival gang, they would actually have a cooler name, but, we'll say the rival gang kicks you out of your hideout, right? Or they push in on your turf and they run you out of town. Okay. So that says, that is a clock. The GM has put this threat out there. And the GM is basically saying, if this 12 segment clock ever gets completely filled in, then the rival gang will have accrued enough money, power, influence, men, women, material, sorcery, whatever, to run you out of town, to run you, your gang, your whole operation out of town. And it's just hanging out there. And it's not something that's going to be resolved today. It's not something that's going to be resolved this session. It is something that kind of is out there like a slow burning, ticking time bomb. Now, going back to our mission to crack open the safe. Part of the way you keep scores from spiraling out of the way, and part of the way that you keep the game's tension high and flowing and moving, is sometimes, and this is where GMs get a lot of latitude in this game in terms of control. It's not fudging. Let me be very clear about this. It is not fudging. It is completely following the rules. Does this give the GM a lot of narrative control? It absolutely does. What a GM can do is when a player is going to say, you enter into a room, okay? And the player says, oh, what the hell? This is where the safe is supposed to be. And the GM says, there's no safe to be found. And the player says, it must be hidden somewhere. Derek, I want to look around. Is there some sort of secret passage? Is it hidden behind something? Maybe it's in a loose floorboard or behind a painting or something. And I say, okay. You only have a few minutes. what are you doing? And you're saying, I'm going to look everywhere. And I go, okay, that is a survey. That's one of our actions. I say, make a survey check. That's the, perception check of Blaze in the Dark, survey. And the player makes their survey check and they get, guess what? And I say, okay, guess what? This is risky, right? The guards are going to be here any moment. You can hear the marquee. You can see the light from his torch, coming down the hallway, right? So the time is of the essence. And as a GM, I'm feeling like this score feels like it's come to a natural conclusion. They have overcome challenges. They have overcome obstacles. We've been here long enough. I'm ready for this to end. I can feel it from them, my players. They're ready for this to end. And your player makes a survey roll. And guess what? You did it. You guessed it. They get a 4 or 5, right? So they do it. They locate that the safe is hidden behind a portrait or a gilded portrait frame that's hanging on the wall. And they're able to quickly access it. But there's a problem. There is a complication that comes out of this. And I start thinking, I just want this score to be over. I don't want to create another complication that they have to deal with, right? Like, so what do? I don't tick the clock of this mission. I go back to that big 12 segment clock where their group gets run out of town by their rival gang, and I tick that one. The players are still paying the mechanical cost for having rolled a 4 or 5. I'm not giving them a free lunch. When they roll a 4 or 5, a complication occurs, a clock is ticked, and I have done that. It doesn't have to be the clock that has to do with what they're doing right now. Sometimes it can be, but as the GM, you have in your tool set the ability to go big picture and reach for that big, huge note card that says the rival gang kicks you out, and it's got 12 blank spaces, and you fill in 2 of them. Now, is that a problem for today? No. And in a way, the players are like, okay, cool. Like, we don't have to worry about it. And they're right. It is. It's kind of a free lunch for today. But when the players are done with the score and they go into free play, they're going to suddenly look at the whole board, and there's going to be 5 or 7 or 9 of these big clocks all ticking. Some of them are things that the players want to have happen. Some of them are things the players might not want to have happen. But every time they go through this cycle of play, right, of the free play, score, downtime, free play, score, downtime, then these clocks are all going to slowly tick. And that means that the campaign is going to push forward as we move forward. Frostjack says, how do you describe this to the players? You don't. This is not necessarily a related to the exact thing that they are doing. Darth Gorlock says it's fantastic. You can use a cutaway to explain it to them, right? All the dice roll is telling us is that all the dice roll is telling us is there is a complication and a clock gets ticked. And so I might say you find the survey, you start breaking into the safe and you start clocking into it. At the same time, across town, you see one of your low-level lackeys, someone that you use to sort of deliver unimportant packages to some of your clients. You see him getting roughed up and beat up at a local tavern. And you can see that the guy holding his shirt and screaming at him, "Tell us where they are," has the ruby red signet ring of the circle of blood. And then, boom, mark the 2 ticks, right? The players get it. They understand that mechanically what happened is they didn't roll a 6. And so the game says you have to be punished. So I, the GM, am doing that. I'm not cheating. I'm not doing anything because I want to and I think it'll be a cool story. Nope. This is just a natural reaction to the way that the game's mechanics are working. But they get that mechanically, I ticked that clock because they were on this mission looking for a safe. The two have nothing to do with one another. The mechanics are tying them together, but the two of them have nothing to do with one another. And that is a fantastic tool and a great way as a GM. Now, this is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Okay. You do need to, I'm not trying to say that you should be afraid of this, but you know what the other thing is too is like the GM doesn't have to do this alone. This is very much a all hands on deck experience. Work with your players, talk to your players, say something like, all right, you guys, you found the safe, but I got to have this complication. I want to tick the clock 2 ticks on the rivals run you out of town. What happened? Like, why are they getting closer to that? And then your players are going to chime up and they're going to say, oh, I don't know. What if they, what if one of them is found out where we like to drink, and now they have like they bribed one of the bard maids to feed them information about any time we're there, and they're going to start trying to like tail us and follow us to our secret headquarters. And I go, dude, that's awesome. That's a great idea. Great, cool. Mark in the 2 ticks. We're all in it together. It's a collaborative effort, and that's what makes the game so fun. It's not all on you, and it's okay. Dramatic irony. If you don't know what dramatic irony is very popular in Greek and Shakespearean plays, but it's used in modern day things too. A dramatic irony is where the audience knows that something is not all as it seems, right? The audience knows that the 2 characters on stage are father and son. The audience knows that, Juliet is just sleeping, right? And that she's not dead. So when Romeo kills himself, it's like, oh, Jesus, like, he didn't have to do that. We knew that, right? It's okay for your players to know that Juliet is just sleeping and isn't dead. It's okay for your players to sort of be in on the action because they are the players, but they are also the audience, right? They are also here. The GM is the audience, right? We all want to be audience members, right? We all want to be able to like hang out and have fun. Now, let's see what Ikomos is saying. He says, oof, you're going to need all director stance players for that. People who want to make the story more complicated and dramatic without worrying about how their characters succeed. You would think that, Ikomos, except in this game, the way that you earn experience points is by doing things like desperate actions. And at the end of the session, the GM will ask you questions like, did your trauma or vice cause you problems? Yes or no. If you answered yes, mark an experience. If you answered no, you mark no experience. So the game's experience point system, the reward mechanism, encourages players to get into trouble and to do these kind of things. I don't want to say it's like 100% like it's going to encourage them to screw themselves over, but the game system is designed to reward players and to reward characters who are kind of, getting into some shit. Because what gets rewarded gets repeated. I don't want my players to have to choose between screwing themselves over and having a good story. Let's just have it all. They're going to have a good story by screwing themselves over, which is going to give them experience points, which they're going to use to increase their characters, become better, become more badass, which is going to get them into more crazy things, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is not a death spiral, right? This is what they call a hermetic circle, right? It's a healing circle. It just pushes itself forward and forward. And I think that is where the beauty and the design of clocks comes in, because what will happen is with 100% surety is after a period of time, there are going to be a bunch of clocks out on the table. Okay. And some of those clocks are going to be things that the players do not want to have happen. Some of those clocks are going to be things that the players want to have happen. And eventually, when a session starts, you are just going to be able to kind of come out and say, here are the clocks that are on the table. What do you all want to do? And your players are going to start doing things like, oh man, we need to deal with that clock before it becomes a real problem. Or I really want to make sure that clock finishes. The players will start to essentially run themselves, right? Because at a certain point, the clocks are the campaign. They are going to tell the players what is going to happen or what might happen, and they are going to be very motivated to do that, right? They are going to be, dare I say, pushed into wanting to do that. Darth Golak. I will say, though, there aren't really any reward mechanics for helping come up with consequences, but it does have rewards for desperate rolls using vice traumas to create consequences, etc. Yes, but here's the key thing, though, Darth Gorlock, to a certain extent. The consequence is there, whether the players want it to be or not, right? You're almost basically saying, look, this is happening whether you want it to or not because of the mechanic. I'm not offering you this. I'm saying it is going to happen. And you guys get a say that if you want to, put in your kind of 2 cents about what it could be, then, please feel free to do so. Let me do something really quick. This is just an example. Now, and this was, this was fairly well on. There we go. So this here was from a Blades in the Dark game, which I ran on, yes, Roll20. This is how long ago this was. And what you can see here is these were some of the clocks that were going on in our campaign. You can see here that we had accidental religion. This is because Matt Holloway, aka Burl from our Rise of the Runelords game, was sort of faking himself off as like a prophet in order to make money. But whenever he created problems for this, the joke was that if he messed up too much, he was accidentally going to create a religion. And by the way, we eventually shifted. We moved off of Roll20. But this accidental religion clock eventually did end up getting filled in. And so this did actually happen. You can see a clock here, which is the Spirit Wardens discover you. So the Spirit Wardens are this powerful faction inside the city, which have to deal with policing ghosts and spirits. And in our game, the band of criminals were drug dealers who turned ghost essence into a really powerful drug. And this was a problem. And so the Spirit Wardens were coming after them. They were also betraying and blackmailing this group called the Path of Echoes. And you can see that the bad thing that could come to happen is the Path of Echoes figures it out. The Crows were a rival gang, and their anger was building. The Dockers were another gang that the group sort of made an enemy above, and this was a clock building up to whether or not they would strike back. And this is another clock. This is somebody they actually killed, a Captain Cobb, and this clock was this ghostly spirit trying to come back to haunt them. So this is just one small example of a fairly early part of a campaign of how we used clocks to sort of dovetail into a whole mess of things, which eventually led to an entire campaign. And I didn't plan any of it, neither did my players. It just sort of all emerged organically. Now we can also see, if we go to some of these character sheets, like here's this clock here is filled. So this is on the character sheet. This character here was trying to find an antiques smuggler. This was a personal project that this player character was trying to do in the campaign. And you can see that they eventually filled up this clock and they were able to successfully find a antiques dealer. You can see here, oh, this one's much more complicated. This was like their sort of tinkerer. It's called a leech. They're sort of like an alchemist inventor in Pathfinder 2 terms. They were trying to build their own electroplasmic incinerator so that they could burn ghosts themselves and collect the ghost dust without having to steal it from the spirit wardens. Now you can see that I was like, well, that is extremely difficult. And this was a very, very, very complicated clock, but it's something that she wanted. And it's something that she worked on throughout the course of the campaign. This gave her direction. This gave her motivation. And once it was complete, it also gave them a lot of really cool leverage to be able to do things in the campaign. So, this is just an example of a real campaign and how we used clocks to essentially tell the whole story. I mean, I kind of told the story before, but, that's ultimately kind of what drove the whole campaign. Let's see. Holy shit, I just joined when you guys were talking about the main reason I want to play this game. Very cool. Thank you. Great role playing. I love that you still haven't changed your great role playing, Debbie. That's fantastic. Is there a clock module on Foundry that I can violently shunt into my D&D campaign? I know that they made one clock, which I tried to use once, but it was bugged. And then I think there's a module called Lancer clocks, which I think works okay. So I use a separate scene the players can jump to for clocks, then use the drawing tool in there. It works if you don't want any modules. What would you run a game of this in now that you are not rolling Roll20? What is best? Well, Mystic Eye Games, Darth Gorlock has sort of arranged this. There's a new VTT that is made. Well, it's not made just for Blades in the Dark, but it's sort of made just for Blades in the Dark. I signed up for it, I have to say, and I haven't actually. It's called Multiverse is what it's called. And let me pull this up. So this is this new thing. It's called One More Universe or One More Multiverse. And it is, it is apparently, sign in with Google. Anyways, yeah, it's like this. It's this weird, like 8-bit, weird sort of thing, and like it apparently it's supposed to have everything in here. Let me see here. So I'll say here. So like, it's got this weird kind of cool 8-bit art to it, and I think the game has like, yeah. So like, here's our map of, it's got some music, I guess, going. Okay. Enter. Okay. So like, here is the actual map of Duskwall, which I know pretty well because I've run a couple campaigns here. And then you can create, you can create clocks over here on the right, and you can give them a different color. And I can say, okay, I want to create a 6-segment clock, and I can create it there. Boom. We've got a new 6-segment clock. The chat tips me, right? And you can create a new crew here. You can be assassins. You can be bravos. You can be occult. Anyways, kind of a weird game, but it seems to work okay. And you can create all sorts of different stuff. But yeah, I completely agree with what Darth Gorlock is saying, which is, don't prep, with your VTT. I mean, the whole point of that VTT is really just that it's like they've got scenes where you can just, there's no grid, there's nothing like that. You're just dragging your characters there, so you can just kind of say like, okay, there we go. It's not designed to be tactical. It's not designed for prep. Is Duskwall a play on Dunwall from Dishonored? Yes, it is. In fact, one of the main. Oh, by the way, look at that! Look at that! I told you that clock finished eventually. I don't know if this will pick this up, but that does say accidental religion, and it is filled. Because eventually we stopped playing on Roll20. We started playing in person after COVID ended, and eventually that did fill in. No, in the beginning of the book, they say that they were inspired by the Thief video game series and the Dishonored video game series and Fallout New Vegas. So it's absolutely a play on that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that if I had, to take something away from Blades in the Dark, what this game does really well is, okay, let's think about this from like Powered by the Apocalypse. The one thing I do not like about Powered by the Apocalypse is there is no way easily to describe how risky or how not risky something is. In Powered by the Apocalypse, everything is just 2d6 plus stat, 6 minus, you fail, 7 through 9, it's a partial success, 10 plus, it's a strong success, full success. And that's fine. And the way that Powered by the Apocalypse works is we still understand fundamentally that, like, if our character tries to, jump over a mountain and they roll a 10, right, they're not going to succeed just because they rolled a 10. It's not like some silly, like, but I rolled a 20, it means I'm automatically succeeding. But Powered by the Apocalypse is very simple. It's very quick. You can, boom, jump right into it. And the GM will ask you to make a roll, you'll make a roll, and we're moving on. The story's moving on. Everything sort of gets dialed into one roll. There's no conversation about my position. Is it better? Is it worse? How effective am I going to be? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Blades in the Dark slows it down a little bit. Blades in the Dark wants to take that time to have those conversations to say, yes, my character is in a good position. Yes, my character would be very useful here. My character bought electroplasmic ammo, which is not really that useful against people. I mean, it might tase them up a little bit, but it actually very potent against ghosts. And so when a rogue spirit attacks us as we're making our way into the necrotorium, and I pull out my pistol, which is loaded with 2 shots of ectoplasmic silver shot, and I go to make my shot, Powered by the Apocalypse doesn't really have a way easily to quickly show that effect. But in Blades in the Dark, we can have that conversation, and I could say, oh, yeah, you have great effect here because you have potency. You have the perfect ammunition for this. And so your character is pretty much going to, if they get the shot off, blow these things away because you have incredibly great effect, powerful effect against this type of monster. Think of it another way. Imagine we're playing it. There's not really a D&D Blades in the Dark. Someone tried to make one called, what was it called? Blades Against Darkness. That was the name of the game. I don't think it ever got published or printed, and it had some problems with it. But they tried to make this game called Blades Against Darkness, which was kind of like a D&D Blades in the Dark. And but going back to this effect thing, imagine we're playing D&D and a werewolf is attacking us. Now in D&D, what do we have? We go, oh, well, when we're used to playing D&D or Pathfinder, we say, oh, a werewolf doesn't really takes less damage from normal weapons. But if you have silver weapons, they're particularly brutally effective. Easy. If we're playing Blades in the Dark and I say, oh, you're like, oh, I'm going to run up to that werewolf and I'm going to, shoot him right in the stomach. And I say, okay, but your effect is going to be limited because your bullets aren't silver. But if someone did have silver bullets, we would say, oh, your effect is great because you have silver bullets. It's really important. And I stress this in Powered by the Apocalypse, but I really stress it in Blades in the Dark. You want those mechanics and you want those narrative elements, those fictional elements, they need to interconnect. They need to talk to each other because that's what makes the game fun and interesting. It's not enough to just say, oh, that's cool flavor. Like, no, it should matter. And sometimes in Powered by the Apocalypse, it doesn't matter because the game isn't concerned with getting into that level of minutia. It's just make a roll and move on. It is a bit more fast paced. Blades in the Dark can slow down a bit, but also realize that with Blades in the Dark, you could do an entire gang fight. And dare I say, you should do an entire gang fight with one roll. And the game gives you the tools to be able to do this. We got a super chat coming in from Great Role Playing Debbie. Because I care. Heart, heart, heart. Oh, my microphone's in the way. Okay, there we go. But also because I love the prepless DMing. Yeah, it's on another level to see how this game works when you know what you're doing and you're comfortable doing it, and you have a group of players who are bought in, and how much fun you can have with it without ever preparing anything. I cannot stress to you enough. I ran Blaze in the Dark campaign. The group started off as, small-time drug runners who got their hands on some, powerful stuff, screwed over some other people, stole their stuff so that they could turn out a better product, moved in, overcame political obstacles, created a rent in the space-time continuum because they were trying to blackmail somebody else and blame them for the steal of this ghost material, ended up getting involved with politics at the highest level, ended up using their money and considerable influence in order to bribe politicians. And then one of the characters ended up becoming elected the mayor of the town because of their influence and power. And it all just, I didn't prep a single thing of it. It was just incredibly rewarding because I didn't have to do any work. I promise you, I didn't. Darth. The more, okay. The more I read PBTA with Atla, he means Avatar: The Last Airbender, but really he should mean Avatar Legends, which is the name of the game. The further and further away I think Forged in the Dark is from PBTA. The mechanics around the player agency in action roles makes Forged in the Dark. Yes, I know that John Harper says that Blaze in the Dark is powered by the apocalypse. And who am I to say he's wrong? But I do agree with you that I think that having the agency in the action role is definitely a huge deal. As a player, you get a ton of say-so. You never feel like you're at the mercy of the dice. Are position and effect a good fit for guiding D20 skill challenges? It seems like it would massively enhance them and ensure you're bringing the fiction to the forefront. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the key thing here is you have to, the weird thing here is in Forged in the Dark, Blades in the Dark, the game that we're talking about, we are used to in D&D, we are used to modeling situations and understanding the difficulty of a situation through its DC, right? And that is how we typically sort of model things. We say, oh, this thing is harder, or this thing is higher risk, ergo the DC is higher. Oh, this thing is easier, this thing is less risky, the DC is lower. Understand that that is not how Blades in the Dark works. In Blades in the Dark, the DC is constant. Okay? In Pathfinder 2 terms, what is changing is the DC is always the same. But what's changing is, but what happens on a failure or a critical failure? If something is risky, the DC is the same. But a failure screws you over and a critical failure really puts you in a hot seat. If something is really, really risky, well, that DC is the same. But if you fail, it's a horrible outcome. And if you critically fail, it's a unbelievably bad outcome. That is kind of counter-purposed to the way that D20 is designed to escalate. Because again, we're used to these DCs being a model for reality where difficult things means lower chance of success. But again, I cannot stress this enough. If you go back to this table here of controlled, risky, and desperate, no matter what your position is, whether it's controlled or desperate, you have the same chance of success. You need a 6 or you need a 4 or 5 to get a success, but with a potential complication. But either way, a 4, a 5, or a 6 is a success. And that's whether it's controlled or risky or desperate. This is such a fundamental shift from the D20 mindset that I cannot stress that you may not fully understand it, even though I just said it to you. We are not used to thinking that way. We are used to thinking of things in terms of, oh, something is harder, the DC is higher. High risk, high reward. And the risk is you miss and you did nothing. That's not how Forge in the Dark works. So I'm curious. I've been saying about this. I'm curious how Darth Gorlock says here. Says this. Sorry, checking out here. Darth says, reading the book and buying into the prepless nature of it will change your outlook on our TTRPGs. Yeah, it was a big change for me. And I got to be honest with you. I love a lot of games. And I don't want to say that Blades in the Dark is my favorite RPG of all time, because it's not. But I will say this. It's probably the RPG that I find myself the most often wishing I was playing, because it's easy for me to run. It's easy. There's no prep. And the game gives me and my players the tools that I need in order to succeed as a game master and to be able to kind of get a compelling game out of it. Now, there are problems about this, and I would be remiss if I did not talk about some of these issues which some groups have. And to be honest with you, I'll be completely honest with you. I had these problems with a game I ran of Scum and Villainy, which is Blades in the Dark, but in space. I mean, it's literally called Scum and Villainy, very much Mos Eisley. Hans, think Malcolm Reynolds and the crew of the Firefly, think Han Solo on the Millennium Falcon, and you have a good idea of what Scum and Villainy is about. The problem that I had with this group is, when I ran it, is Blades in the Dark is a game where you're not heroes. The game is kind of designed so that you never quite succeed. Right? Like, think about Han, right? It's like he's trying to pay back Jabba, and then he gets boarded by an Imperial thing. He's got to drop all the credits. Then he tries to get the money from Obi-Wan Kenobi, but then Alderaan gets blown up, right? Like, eventually he becomes a hero, right? At the end of the movie of A New Hope, and then he's on a different path. But up until that point, he was never really able to feel like he was able to get ahead. And when I played Scum and Villainy with my group, I found that I think sometimes they were frustrated because they kind of wanted to be the big damn hero. They wanted to get ahead. They wanted to, win, but without any caveats, without any complications, without any lingering threats on the horizon. They just wanted to be able to just say, we win, end of story, good night. And this game isn't really designed to do that. It is designed so that your character always has another problem, another thing that's going wrong, another person coming after them. The ship needs fuel. Your deflector array is broken. The one person who you did a job for thinks that you scammed him out of 100,000 credits, right? Like, there's always another hurdle to overcome, and that's what keeps, sort of the wheels of the game moving. Once the group starts to and that can be frustrating for people who might want a little bit more of a heroic kind of big damn hero feel from their game, because they kind of expect to win. And especially if you come from D20, in D20, we are used to this idea of, look, you either fail and nothing bad happens, but nothing good happens either. It's just failure is nothing, or you succeed and you get everything you ever asked for without having to pay any prices for it whatsoever. And so if you think about that, if a failure generates a +0 and a success generates a +1, then over a long enough period of time, the average of every action you take is +0.5, which means that on average, over enough period of time, you're going to fail and nothing changes, but then you're going to succeed and you're going to move a step ahead. And then you're going to succeed and you're going to move a step ahead. And there's going to be this sense of climbing the mountain, of scaling the steps. But in Blades in the Dark, it's not quite that simple, right? The clean, pure +1 is a rare thing. And even the success is often a partial success. It's kind of like a +1 -1 nets out to a 0. And if you fail, like the bad failure, like the 1, 2, or 3 failure, it's more like a -1, right? Because nothing is never a result that really happens in this game. You're always going to get something happen, even if it's bad. And so when getting ahead is very rare, and a lot of times you're getting a lot of zeros and might even be taking steps back, it can feel very frustrating to some people because it's going to feel like, fuck, I cannot get ahead. And it's you might feel like it's like I'm stuck in some dead end job and I've got debts and now the furnace broke and I got to fix that. We don't have the money for that. And the kids got to go to college and I got to start saving for that. But how am I supposed to save for that when we're behind on the damn mortgage? Right. Like, and I've seen people, it happened in our game, kind of get stressed out playing. It wasn't Blades in the Dark. It was Scum and Villainy, but they kind of got stressed out. Like real life stressed out because they were like, man, this game really just keeps you in the lurch. So that is something for me. I mean, there's a lot of things that people might not like about the game. You might not like the narrativist elements. I think I saw somebody say that, their GURPS mindset, hearing the narrative elements were making their brains melt. Like, that's fine. Like, that's something that's pretty obvious and you're either going to like that or you're not going to like that, but you can't fault the game for that. Like, that is just the way it is. But this element, which I'm talking about now, is a lot more subtle. And it's something that, especially if you're coming from big damn heroes, we win every fucking time, D20, we just keep going up and 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 up. And we kill orcs and then we kill ogres and then we kill trolls and then we kill giants and then we're killing demons and then we're killing gods. And, eventually the credits roll. If that's your mindset of gaming, this could be very frustrating because it's going to feel like you're not able to really get ahead. So we're a little bit behind here. Someone asked if there were clocks in Foundry and I had to go find the module. It's called Progress Clocks. Whoa!
Tipped $75. Just bankrolling the follow-up stream. Don't mind me.
Well, that's 100% you then, Darth Gorlock. Yes, thank you to Darth Gorlock for that very, very generous tip. We will do a follow-up stream. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. In fact, Darth, if you are up for it, I'd love to have you on as someone who is playing Blades in the Dark, who's hacking it into Pathfinder 2, who's interested in the system. Maybe we can have you on and maybe a third person just to provide a context, but it could just be the two of us. And we could just talk about the game system and some of the challenges with running it, some of the advantages of running it. I think that would be a very, very interesting and cool thing. So thank you, Darth. And I look forward to feel free to say no, Darth. That's totally fine. But I'd love to have you on again. All right. Thank you very much. I'd love a stream with a look at these different base systems like PBTA, standard D20, stuff and some relative pros and cons. Yeah, sort of like an all-in-one encompassing stream breakdown. Yeah, that would be kind of a cool stream to do. GM Scott is in the house. He says, the key is knowing the system very well. When I was running more often, I could do prepless sessions and an on-the-fly campaign all the time, even in systems like PF1 or Champions or Star Wars role-playing games. Absolutely. I definitely think that there's something to be said about, having a lot of time and in-depth knowledge with the system makes it a lot easier to run it on the fly. But Blades of the Dark is pretty damn... There's kind of nothing to prep, really. NPCs don't have stats. I don't, there are no... Jumping over a ravine or fighting the greatest duelist in the land is the same thing in the game. It's just an action test. There's no stats. There's no trait system. It's just a check. Okay, cool. Clocks are actors. Yeah, again, I knew there was a module. When I used it, it was broken. So double check it's not broken, but that sounds pretty awesome that it's working. See, RPG Emmer says they're supposed to be under tiles. See, I think that's where mine were originally, so maybe that's like an old one. I don't know. It's weird. Are there any Forged in the Dark games where you are assumed to play a more upstanding character? Well, I'll say this. In Band of Blades, which is very much based off of that book series, the Black Company novels, you're a little bit of a grim and gritty person, but fundamentally, you are a member of an army that is being assaulted and attacked by this undead horde, and you are trying to fight your way through a campaign, like not like a D&D campaign, but like a military campaign to have victory over this undead army. And so I guess that kind of makes you the good guys, right? Like good guys in like the harsh reality of a brutal, realistic war in a slightly fantasy sense. So yeah. So I don't think it's so much about being an upstanding character. I think it's more about, you need to have a mechanic where there's some sort of like mission that you go on. I don't have it, but I know that there is a Blades in the Dark hack for Cyberpunk called Hack the Planet. And that makes total sense, right? If you know Shadowrun or cyberspace, right? Like runners are always going, in Cyberpunk, like runners are always going on missions for corps because they're, disposable and expendable assets, deniable assets. And they have to go, infiltrate the rival corp and hack their bank records to, know which politician they're funding, like that's a very Blades in the Dark kind of doable, Forged in the Dark doable game. In theory, what this Blades Against Darkness game was trying to do was to turn like going into the dungeon as the score, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of an interesting idea. I don't know where they ever got with it. I don't think it ever made it to print or publication. I think it might have just died, back in beta PDFs, but it was kind of an interesting idea. The idea of thinking of the dungeon as the score. Yeah, Eric is completely right. In Band of Blades, you actually kind of play both the grunts and sort of the commanding officers at the same time. It's really kind of an interesting mechanic. Band of Blades is Scum and Villainy is Blades in Dark in space for the most part. Band of Blades is definitely it's very much still Forged in the Dark, but it is kind of its own unique thing. And there's a lot about that game that's very different and unique. RPG Gamerous, RPG game. I don't know how to say that. RP Gamerous, or RPG Amorous, says they're working on a hack where you're a group of investigators in a weird paranormal setting. I think that sounds really cool too. Like an X-Files type game for Blades in the Dark. Like, I don't know if that's exactly what they were talking about here, but I think that would actually work really well. So I think that's pretty sweet. Darth says that they would be down to join us, but their mic and webcam are shit. That's all right. We can't all be Knights of Last Call quality. Ryan says, I'll be honest, I didn't realize I was using the wrong method. That's all right, Ryan. You helped support just to show the love for Derek, and I appreciate it so much anyways. It all ends up, look, I'm not going to pixel bitch over where people tip and donate. It's all very well thanked. And if there's any amount of support and interest for a stream, especially for a follow-up stream, we'll definitely do it. Okay. You want Ryan on as well? All right. Okay, there it goes. Low quality. All right. Let's see. Oh, kind of bushy beard. Maybe we could get your thoughts on Dungeon World sometimes. I've always wanted to run it and would enjoy hearing your opinions. Well, kind of bushy beard. I do have, I think if you look on our channel, I do talk about Dungeon World. I talk about the principles of Dungeon World specifically. Long story short, I will say this. Dungeon World is it's both a blessing and a curse. It is a great way. It is in the Venn diagram of narrative powered by the apocalypse indie games and standard D20. It is definitely a in between. It's a good crossover. That being said, I think sometimes Dungeon World is a little bit too close to the source material of D20. And I think that makes people trying to play it like it's just D&D, where you're using 2d6 instead of a D20. And I think that leads to bad outcomes. And Dungeon World is probably a game that I've played the most that isn't like a standard D20 game, because I ran it at Gen Con for many, many years, and I would always be running it for new people, usually people coming from a D20 background, and there's habits there that you have to break, and that if you let people, if you don't break people of those habits and you let them treat Dungeon World as just sort of D&D, but with 2d6 plus stat instead of D20, you're going to get bad outcomes, and people are going to be very frustrated. And that could be, certainly problematic. And so sometimes there's part of me that wishes that Dungeon World was very different, because then it would just be like, okay, it's easy to cut, off that tendency to just revert back to our D20 roots, right? Does that make any sense? Have you looked at the sci-fi version of Blades in the Dark, Scum and Villainy? Oh, you just caught up, Brutus. Yeah, we talked about Scum and Villainy for a good amount of time. But yes, I have run Scum and Villainy 1.5 times, we'll say that, and enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. I like the weird, dark, haunted, death ghost city of Blades in the Dark a lot, but I like the universe of Scum and Villainy. I like Firefly is probably one of, if not my favorite TV show of all time. Obviously, it was only one season, so we'll never know. But one season, a movie, I guess. But this game was very, very clearly inspired by Firefly. There's literally, class abilities that you can take in this. Like the pilot has a class ability called Leaf on the Wind. One of the merc muscle character can take weapon upgrades and has a personalized plasma pistol named Vera. I mean, it's very clearly Firefly inspired, and I love that. So that's a lot of fun for me. Let's see. Yeah, we did a PBTA history live stream as well. If you look, kind of bushy beard, the thumbnail I think has a big black and white Powered by the Apocalypse thumbnail, and there's a good chunk of Dungeon World discussion in there too. I think that was like a 2.5 hour stream. So let's see. Yes, Adam Cobell had a lot of controversy around him and with some of the things that he did on his live stream, which, to be honest with you, are crazy that any sane person would ever do that in a live stream, period, no matter how comfortable your players are with it. But, it's a situation with artist, baby in bathwater. And, Dungeon World has another author as well, which is Sage Latora. And, it's a shame that he has to suffer the brunt for that as well. But I mean, obviously that's a personal decision, and I certainly regret. I don't beget anybody who chooses not to support that. But that is definitely the case, that there is a bit of controversy around that. But yeah, no. Overall, my general feeling is that Dungeon World still does pretty well. Okay, but if we're being honest here, okay, and I like to be honest with you all, Dungeon World is old. It's old. The Powered by the Apocalypse tech has evolved a lot. Dungeon World came out in like 2010 or something, or 2011. I like, first edition D&D and second edition D&D. It's what I grew up on, but it's not the game I pull out. I mean, there might be times where people say, "Hey, we're playing first edition D&D." I'd say, "Yeah, I'll play that for a couple weeks," but it's not going to be the edition I go to, because it was 50 years ago and they just didn't make as good of games back then. I mean, I know maybe that's very controversial to say this, but one of the things that I don't like about 5th edition D&D is it felt like, look, I get it. Not everybody loved 4th edition. It didn't sell as well as they wanted it to. Fine. But you can't deny that it was trying to push the envelope of what gaming could be. They were introducing new tech. They took risks. They went in a different direction. 5th edition was just a big steps backwards. And that's what I didn't like about it. I like for games to evolve. I like for games to learn from prior games and push the hobby forward. And so I like Dungeon World, and I played a lot of Dungeon World in the 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014 era at Gen Con and at home, and it was a lot of fun. But, that was 10 years ago, and I look back on the game now, and I look at the games that we have available now, like Root and Avatar and Masks and Thirsty Sword Lesbians and just all of these award-winning Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I go, wow, these games are surgical. These games are designed so well, and they are doing something very interesting, and they're doing something very compelling. And I like the thought and the care and the consideration that went into the game mechanics to produce a expected outcome, and then to deliver on that. I mean, that's huge, because that's what I really want from a game, right? I want a game to say, this is the kind of experience you get when you play this game, and you end up with that kind of experience, so I that's incredible for me. What are some of the main incorrect assumptions that people coming to Dungeon World make from D20 make? You just roll the dice too much, Frostjack. That's the main thing. They look at the move in Dungeon World called hack and slash, and they just automatically equate it to a D20 attack roll. And they think that is a 1-to-1 analog, that Dungeon World hack and slash equals D20 strike or Pathfinder 2 strike. That's the biggest mistake, is people roll the dice way too much. And the other mistake that people make is they don't do GM moves right, and they get pretty boring with it, and they just end up usually just saying, you take damage, you take damage. And then people get really upset because they'll go, well, a character was trying to find a secret door, and they rolled a 6-, so that means what? That they have to take damage, or like the ground collapses on them? And it's like, no, you could have that happen, but certainly if you're doing that every single time, that is the core crux of your problems. It's understanding that Dungeon World is a conversation, and that players don't do moves. Moves trigger off of what players or the GM say. It's a little bit of a wonky nomenclature, but I think it's key to understanding how the game works. And it tries to explain this very, very well, but people just tend to miss over it or gloss over it because they go, oh, that's usual RPG bullshit. Yeah, the game's a conversation. Of course it is. No. But in Powered by the Apocalypse, and therefore Dungeon World, the game really is just a conversation that has no rules at all. And everything that we're saying goes until we do or say something, and the rules insist. The GM doesn't get to make a call. The player doesn't get to make a decision. The rules insist that that move happens. So calling it a move, I think, is part of the problem, the nomenclature. A move implies this is an option on my hotbar, and I can push it, and I can push it. But it's really not. They really should be thought of as reactions. But they're not reactions to something that's happening in the fiction. It's a reaction to something that you said in the fiction. We're talking, you're describing something. I describe a fireball heading for you. You say, I'm going to leap out of the way, diving for that group of barrels or behind that pillar. And then I go, okay. And then I go, oh, a move just triggered. You're defying danger. Now we have to get procedural. We step out of the fiction. We step out of the narrative. We now consult mechanics. We go through them. We follow the procedure. We take whatever necessary consequences the game rules tell us to do, which is going to shape and alter our story in a way that we didn't expect. And then we re-enter the fiction with these new parameters that have been set by the results of the move which just happened. But that's in a nutshell. Frostjack wants to know what happened with Adam Cobell. I'm sure someone answered it in chat, but long story short, he had a live stream and he did a scene of sexual assault against another player without their permission or foreknowledge, and that's just in bad taste pretty much in almost every situation. But if you're doing it for a public audience who you have no idea what their buy-in is, it's completely inappropriate. I think it's a pretty tough line to walk, even if it's amongst close personal friends. But in this case, he didn't have her buy-in. He certainly didn't have the audience's buy-in, and people felt it was in horribly bad taste. So, and I do agree with that. I like Adam Cobalt. I've met him. I get that not everybody is perfect 100% of the time, and that was a big L. I'll just say that. That's a really big L. What PBTA would you recommend? Avatar looks like a fun playground. Avatar's pretty complex. I'm not saying it's bad. In fact, I think it's fantastic, but it's definitely more PBTA, what I would say PBTA advanced, than what I would, otherwise recommend. But I think there's a lot to be said about it. Ironically, I mean, there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? The good PBTA games aren't generic. They are about something. So like Ryan is saying here, Masks is about, it's not a superhero RPG. It's a teenage superhero RPG with young heroes who are struggling to come into their own and accept their identity as superhero or person. Am I going to live up to the right? These are fundamental questions that the game is asking. It's not just superheroes. People go, oh, you want the superhero game? Play Masks. That is the wrong thing to say. It's more complicated than that. It's far more complicated than that. The game isn't just superheroes, PBTA style. It is a game fundamentally about identity and belonging and understanding your place in the world. So it is a kind of a complicated question in that respect. I get that, the name of it and the subject matter may not be for everybody, but I don't even know where it is. Usually it's just right there, right behind me, but oh, here it is. But this game did win gold at the NES last year. Thirsty Sword Lesbians obviously is a very pro LGBTQ game. I think we can all agree with that, with the context of it being called Thirsty Sword Lesbians. But the game itself creates a fantastic, I feel, fairly digestible, simple, easy to grok PBTA system about creating sort of swashbuckler, Flash Gordon, swinging on a rope through the ether space and, battling with your laser rapier and, saving the damsel in distress and, kissing her as you're, sailing off into the sunset. I think this game does a fantastic job about it. Yes, there is, a fair amount of this book that, has sort of an assumption that your character is a lesbian. But I'm not going to deny that that is not the case. That is the case. But the game itself does a really good job, I think, of being sort of a good stepping stone into some of the more complex games like Masks, Avatar, Root, which I really like. I like all three of those games, Mask, Avatar, and Root. But my favorite PBTA game is and will always be Monster Hearts 1 and this is 1 and 2 by Avery Alder. The game's a little old, like Dungeon World. It's shown its age a little bit. There are mechanics that are commonly put into Powered by the Apocalypse game now, which I like a lot better. But in terms of creating a play experience, this game still continues to deliver so many years later. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm trying to catch up with chat here. Masks is a superhero setting. Again, I went on a little bit of a rant about that. Superhero kids, Superman's child rather than Superman. Brutus, I love Avatar. We just started a new campaign for our Friday games, our personal games, and it was between Legend of the Five Rings and Avatar. And we decided to go with Legend of the Five Rings, but it was really, really close. And I think it's a fantastic game. And I think that the setting and the mechanics are designed to promote the kind of fun RPG storytelling that I think you can only get with RPGs. I know a lot of people play RPGs and they have a lot of combat, which is fun. Combat in RPGs is fun. But to be fair, like that is something I can do with video games and board games or minis games. So, you know, while it can be fun in role-playing games to move minis on a grid and make attacks, you know, you can get that other places, maybe even better. What I cannot get from these other games is that communal storytelling, the watching a character grow and develop in a completely unbounded way. You know, as a video game, you're like, oh, characters have arcs in video games, or yeah, but it's whatever's programmed by the, you know, designer. I've really started to look at RPGs now for their ability to show and play character arcs. I think that's like the main thing that I look for now when I think about an RPG system. How well is this system designed to create an arc for this character? And what are the challenges that this character is facing? What are the stakes? What are they trying to overcome from a personal issue? And then how does that going to influence the things, the dramatic things around them that they are called upon to do? One of the reasons why I wanted to go to Legend of the Five Rings is because in our campaign, we're sort of doing this backdrop of the Lion Clan is about to go to war with the Crane Clan. And it's going to be one of the biggest clan wars in the last, you know, hundreds of years. But in the midst of this, we're going to have these, you know, handful of samurai who have real personal goals, things that they want to accomplish, things they care about. Some things are very beneficial and beautiful. Some things are very dangerous and deadly. You know, oh, we're going to war with the Cranes. I want to find this man, or I want to find this woman, and I want to kill them because of what they did in my family. And this war provides me with the opportunity to do so, finally. And so the sort of storytelling and as a GM, I don't know. I have nothing planned. I have no adventures or anything. It's all going to just develop. But what's interesting to me isn't, can the heroes accomplish some goal? It's, how will they change? How will they grow? How will they, what sacrifices are they willing to make? What won't they compromise on? What will they compromise on their way to achieving their goals and their responsibilities? That is something I cannot get from a video game or a novel. And so that's why I really like out of role-playing games these days. The early PBTA game books explained what Derek is talking about now really badly. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I agree with you that, I mean, I think they do an okay job at some points and times, but like the modern PBTA games are much better at sort of really going into the detail about this. Let's see here. It probably is a more in-depth combat system for people. No, I don't think it's about broader appeal, Ryan Dale. I think it's about emulating the show. I mean, martial arts bending contests were an important part of the show, and learning techniques and using those techniques in conflicts, in combats, was an important part of the show. So I think that's included because, you know, they want to emulate the show. Ryan talking about Thirsty Sword Lessons. Barbarella plus pulp. Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly. That's a great Barbarella plus pulp. Yes. Have I played any of the various iterations of Cortex games? I played some of the OG Cortex games. Smallville, Leverage, and I think Battlestar Galactica. But I think I only played them as like at Gen Con. Like, I don't think I ever owned any of those books. I might have owned the Smallville book once. I don't even know where it would be. But that was like OG Cortex. And I know that the Cortex Prime has changed a lot. But yeah. But yes. but I don't recall hating it. I'll have to take a peek at Monster Hearts then. Normally not my go-to theme. Brutus, it's a very mature game. I'll just say that. You've just got to ignore that you must be this gay to play part of TSL. Yes. Like, I totally respect that they are like, look, we're making a gay game and we're making it for gay people. But you don't have to be gay to play Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Let's see. Guardian of the Rune joins us. Do you think Legend of the Five Rings is very complex with opportunities? Yes. I do. What we are doing for our current campaign is we're shrinking down what the opportunity list greatly, because there's too many and it can cause analysis paralysis. And quite frankly, a lot of those opportunities aren't very interesting or compelling anyways. So I sort of want to rely on a handful of mechanical ones that they can use in conflict scenes. And then in non-conflict scenes, I want them to be very open-ended and narrative-based and just very much like, oh, you got 2 op on that roll or 3 op? Like, yeah, you can basically like totally create something out of thin air. And like, yes, you did it and you did it so well. And we'll just make something up about how awesome and incredible opportunity is for you and make it very, very, very free form, very, very narrative. If we're in a conflict stance, we'll be a little bit more mechanical, but then I think it's just going to be a list of like 5 things that you can do with each ring. Ikomo says that characters changing part of L5R sounds ironically similar to the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing Zweihander mantra. This isn't a game where characters change the world, but where the world changes the people. Absolutely. One of the things I go on about a lot in this channel is this idea that I hate builds. I know a lot of people love them. I hate builds. I hate the idea that before the game has even started, you have decided what your character is going to be at level 5, at level 10, at level 15, at level 20. How boring. It's like reading the last page of the mystery novel or like reading the mystery novel in reverse. I don't know. Like, that to me is so fundamentally boring. And the fact of the matter is these RPG systems are designed so that you will create that character, because you'll level up and you'll get your feats, or you'll get your, level ups or hit dice or whatever subclass, whatever it's, whatever system you're playing, and you will get to level 15. And if you get to level 15, you will have the feats and the abilities and the features that you thought you were going to have because you took them out of the book. So, I mean, yes, the GM might say that, before you do your build that, I don't allow this uncommon thing or something. But for the most part, I think that's very boring. I hate something. No, I don't. Yes, I do. I hate build. They could be fine for other people. I just don't like doing that. That's never how I build a character. I can promise you 100%. When I sit down to play even a Pathfinder 2 character, I look at what feat or whatever I have available to me now and what seems interesting to play, fun for me as a player, and maybe makes a modicum of sense for what I'm imagining for the character, and I take it. And again, I could be wrong, but I always wonder, because if you know what your character is going to look like at level 20, because you've already built them in Path Builder, then doesn't like playing your character at level 1 feel like very disappointing then? Right? Like, because you're like, oh man, once my character gets this feat, I hear people say this all the time, once my character comes online at level 13, then they'll finally be good. So does that imply that like for the first 12 levels of the game, you're just kind of like miserable? Like, why would you do that to yourself? Now see, this is how you do it. That's how you do it. And that is how I play D20. What Steven from Roll for Combat says, nobody pre-builds in my games, as I give them so many new options during gaming that nobody ever builds their character in directions they expected. And that is exactly what, you want to have happen. I'm a big believer that nobody, if you're, maybe when you're level 1, but if your character is level 5 or level 10 or certainly higher than 10, you shouldn't, your character should show the wear from their campaign. The character should be unique to that story and to that campaign world and to your things that happened at your table. You shouldn't, another way to put it is, you shouldn't be able to build that character more or less like on Path Builder, because it's like, you're like, someone looks at your character sheet and you go, why do you have the ability to turn into a parrot once a day? And then they go, oh, because we saved this flock of Gamayan druids and they were so thankful for helping us. And the GM knows that I hate Gamayans. So he thought it would be funny, and everybody else thought it would be hilarious if they gave me the ability that once a day I could turn myself into a giant parrot. Now, is that stupid and dumb? Yes. But do I love every single thing about that? Of course I do. And why do I love every single thing about that? Because that is something that you can only get from a role-playing game. That is a 100% OG role-playing game thing. And I love stuff like that. Anyways. Why does your wizard have quick draw? Exactly, Lance. I love giving characters. Oh yeah, no, you meant rapid reroll. Yes. I love giving characters and having characters. I like letting players discover their character rather than, I don't know, I guess just fill in the slots that have already been predetermined, right? Like, it's fun to like find your character as the game goes on and truly be like, I don't know what's going to happen to them and I don't know where they're going to be. I think that's very cool. I mean, that City of Mist does, Unfortunate Pumpkin, I mean, that's pretty common in a lot of modern PBTA games, even old PBTA games, is the idea of changing your playbook because of what happened in the game. I just had that come online conversation with a player this weekend. It's awful. Yeah, again, I get that for some people, playing a TTRPG is a lot like playing a video game or an MMO. And that's fine. If that's the level that you interact with the game with, and that's how you enjoy it, I mean, that's fine. And that's why I always hear people say like, oh, wow, like it sucks until you get max level because, you know, you're just trying to get your build online. And like everything up into that point is just a grind. And I feel so weird because whenever I used to play World of Warcraft, I would get to max level and quit. That's like when I would quit the game. I might make another character and like level them up to max if there was some other zones that like I didn't get a chance to do. But most of the time when I got to max level, I was done. I didn't want to play anymore. I enjoyed leveling up and I enjoyed going through the quests and seeing what there was to see in the game and just picking talents that sounded interesting to me or seemed like they would be helpful for the zone or the challenges that my character was facing at the time. And I don't know. I think that's just a much more fun way to play. Doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you, but it was definitely right for me. Brutus says that they're interested in the story of how their character gets that powerful, but that you do have to be open to your character and evolving from what you plan. But trying to find the story opportunity that makes your higher level choice make sense is fun as well. Yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome for you, and I'm very glad that you enjoy that. That's what makes RPGs really cool, is different people can enjoy them differently. Oh, yeah, big time. I mean, it's not about the moral quandaries that the GM forces on the players. I wouldn't even call it a moral quandary. I just think it comes down to players can make any decision they want, and the GM can react in a way that no amount of programming could ever react to. I don't know. Maybe 10 years from now, you know, AI, ChatGPT is auto-generating real-time procedural worlds in World of Warcraft 2, and, you know, you can't even tell the difference. Who knows? But for right now, you know, nothing could beat a GM for that. So, okay. So that is kind of a discussion about Blades in the Dark and about why, and as well as some other generic questions and answers. Thank you, everybody, for tipping. Thank you so much, Darth Gorlock.
I am strong.
Very strong for ponying up the money so that we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more about Blades in the Dark. In fact, sounds like he's willing. We're going to have Darth on to sort of kind of get a fun back and forth, maybe a little bit of interview, talk about some of the things that he and I disagree on, as well as talk about some of our stories and how the game operates. But I think the key thing here today was to really help you understand why the game functions. Yes, there are mechanics. Every game has mechanics, but the mechanics of Blades in the Dark are specifically designed to promote conversation, level set the playing field between the GM and the players, let the players get involved with not only the world, but also with their character's fate and destiny. Your character isn't just being told, this is a check you have to make, and then the player's like, okay, I don't have any choice in the matter. I'm going to roll the die, and I have once the die leaves my hand, I have no further input on the process. And whatever happens to me is out of my hands. Blades in the Dark takes that idea through its mechanics and flips it on its head. The players are proactive. The players are the ones who are choosing to do actions. They are the ones helping set the challenge, the position, the effect. They're the ones deciding how much they want to pay in order to gain a greater chance of success. And then if there are consequences from their actions, the players can say, I don't want that consequence. I'm willing to pay in other resources like stress or coin or rep in order to avoid that consequence. Or they could say, no, I am going to take that consequence because that is acceptable to me. There's no free lunch. People aren't getting out of it. Yes, you're giving them a choice between, I don't know, a shit sandwich and a puke sandwich. But I think when you get to make the choice, it makes a big difference. It makes the players feel like they're more in control. And I think that idea of having agency, real agency, is what makes Blades in the Dark so much fun to play. From a GM perspective, it's just incredibly easy to run with very little to zero prep. Using clocks and using them well can just essentially auto run your campaign for you. And that is an incredibly rewarding thing to have. So yeah, let's see here. Ryan says RPG.
RPG!
Why not? RPG Gamerus says, thanks for the Blades in the Dark stream. Hope you manage to catch the next world too. Hey, if you want to catch the next one, like, subscribe, click the bell icon. We go live every Tuesdays and Thursdays, mostly. I mean, like 99% of the time we're live Tuesdays and Thursdays. But sometimes we go live on a Sunday or a Friday. It varies. It depends. But yeah, check us out. It'll be fun. Next weekend, by the way, starting, I think, on the 17th, it's a Friday, is TPK, Third Party Con, which is being hosted by the Pathfinder 2 subreddit. Yours truly, along with, I think, Ronald, the rules lawyer, No Nat Ones. A couple of us are going to be doing some interviews with some third-party producers of content for Pathfinder 2, including the man, the myth, the legend himself, Steve Glicker, and of course, Mark Seifter. And yeah, oh, that's right. Roll for Combat is a sponsor of TPK. So Third Party Con is going to be running Friday the 17th through Monday the 20th. That's President's Day. It's online. It's going to be a series of Q&As, some interviews, symposiums. They have a pretty full sponsor. There's some well-known, Gallant Goblins there, Roll for Combat's there, but there's also some smaller independent creators who are there as well. So it's just a good opportunity to get to, just talk to people who are into Pathfinder 2. Is there a website? Asking me the important questions. Anyways, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be hosting some people, and I'm looking for the website right now. There's definitely a website. Here we go. PF2 events.com. Is that right? I think this is it. That should be it. Hopefully that's it. But yeah, so that is, you can see yours truly there on the picture. Anyways, it's going to be a really cool, awesome thing. You can see there that stream hosting is provided by Roll for Combat. It looks like they're the big main sponsor. So yeah. Anyways, it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, I got some interviews that I need to pre-record, and then I'm going to be doing some co-hosting a couple of times throughout the weekend just to help them out. Obviously, I think third-party support is awesome. I love independent games. I love independent game creators. I think they are the ones who really can push the envelope forward. And so anything I could do to sort of hype it up. And of course, you know, who knows? It seems like we're in the PF2 renaissance. So what a better time. I mean, of course, when they planned all this, they were not planning on PF2 suddenly selling out everywhere in all stores at the same time. So I think it'll be pretty interesting. But yeah, they've got some good, you know, they got Mark in there. They've got Jason Bullman's going to show up. They got the Hijinks people. No one else could be talking about Sinclair's library. I know that I think Mark is running a game design panel. So Steven says, no, I planned it. I'm sure you did. Oh, that's a great point. Battlecry issue 3. How else could we not say Battlecry issue 3? Yes. Coming soon, Brutus. You know, at this point, I think everybody has articles ready for Battlecry issue 4. Actually, it's kind of my fault, but going forward, starting with issue 4, we are going to probably do our first guest art. Like, obviously, we had Ben do an article for us, but Ben might as well be part of the channel. But we're gonna have some people, if they're interested, submit articles, and we're gonna probably take them in and add them to it. But you know, it's one of those situations where mostly on me, but on Smith as well, like just super busy, and work got crazy for both of us towards the end of the year, and then even the channel got pretty busy for me, and so I just didn't put the time in that I needed to. And then when I finally did get time to sit down and write, I discovered I'm not a great writer. I'm really good at speaking. I'm really good at talking. I'm really good at answering questions, but like writing things out in a way that makes sense, you know what? Turns out not my strong suit, unfortunately. So it's been I'm not going to lie, it's been an uphill struggle. No, not really. Here's the problem, Stephen. Here's the problem. I can write. The problem is when I sit down to do a 10-minute video on YouTube, it turns into a 60-minute video. And the reason is because I want to make sure that you understand not just what the rule is, but why the rule is and what my thought process is. Because I want you to not just accept my word as gospel. I want you to come through the sort of intellectual journey that I went on so that you not only know the rule, but that you sort of understand why the rule. And it turns out that doing that and having it be very, shitty, or not having it be shitty is, pretty tough. And that is horrible. What? Number one, you're crazy. Number two, what? It ate it? Man, what is going on with YouTube? Oh, man. Great role-playing Debbie. Listen, if it did go through, if it doesn't go through, sometimes it gets delayed. So if it doesn't show up, Great Role-Playing Debbie, you can file a complaint with YouTube, and they will get that back to you. I know people have had it happen, and they've done it, and it's worked. But the other day, somebody did tip, and it took like a couple of minutes for it to come through. So it's very generous for you to do that. I'm sorry it's creating a problem, but if it doesn't pop up here in a few minutes, definitely file a complaint with YouTube. You can do it. It's pretty easy to do, because I have seen this happen before. So don't worry. Yes, I'd love that tip, but I don't want you to get screwed out of your money. So that's the main thing. Sorry. We love Derek for his long form content. Could you picture him writing a short letter? Exactly, Brutus. It's just not in my nature. I talk and I talk and I talk and I go off on tangents and I'm like, oh, in order to understand this, you need to understand this. But to understand that, you need to go all the way back to the beginning. And it started in 1974 with Gary Gygax. And you're like, dude, I just wanted to know how the radiation trait worked. And I'm like, well, this is how we get here. Neardom says, miss the stream, but really interested in this RPG. Will be glad to follow the VOD. You help reinvigorate my love for L5R, so I'm eager to get pumped to try this system. Oh, Neardom. There's so many good systems, buddy. They're all out there. Roll for combat. Technical writing, man. It's hard. Yeah, no shit. Again, I always had respect for the game. I mean, listen, I may not agree with their final product, but I'd always respect the writing. I mean, that is definitely a tough part. Like even an author who makes a book, I'm not even RPGs here, just book. Like I might look at a book and go, it's not for me, like some stupid mystery novel or something. I don't really like modern, fiction, like Jack Reacher, that kind of stuff. Jason Bourne type stuff. But man, the work that goes into just being able to put pen to paper and come up with coherent thoughts, very tough. When is the Derek single, i.e. your song single, The World Needs Your Talents? Listen, that was a one-time offer. You only get that on Roll for Combat. Only Steven can get that out of me. Anthony, 3 hours late. Well, better late than never. Guitar Guy Nick, can you wink if the crafting rules in the new Pathfinder 2 book is a lot better? Guitar Guy Nick, I cannot. We already we didn't get in trouble, but Paizo already kind of added us for apparently reviewing too much, I guess, and showing too much during the preview. But all I did was copy Nonat's format when he did his, which he did like a week before us. He did an alchemical one, and he just live streamed it and scrolled through the PDF. And then we kind of got outed and added by Paizo for doing that. And then like a couple days ago, Rules Lawyer did the same thing. He didn't go over every item like we did in detail, but he scrolled through the PDF so you could screenshot and capture everything that you wanted to from the game. So I don't know. I think they were just mad at us because we thought some of the art was silly. But whatever. I don't know. So I don't want to get in trouble. Listen, Paizo, they set the rules. I'll try to obey them. I kept making it a point to say I was not reviewing the book, but it's hard, there are cool items that were very fun and I thought very powerful. And I was excited to say that they were very powerful and very explaining. See, look, I'm not even going to say anything. But, I will say this. There's some items in that treasure vault that are going to either break your campaign or will probably need to be errata. Because there are some really busted items in that treasure vault. So, oops. I don't know if they meant to do that, but there are some pretty busted items. Black, what is it called? Rules Lawyer went over it. Black Tendril Shot or something. It's insane. It's insane. It crit, okay, if you hit somebody with it, they make a fort save, okay? If they critically succeed on the fort save, it's not in cap, by the way. If they critically succeed on the fort save, they are slowed 1. Not for a round. They are slowed 1 until they escape, which means it takes an action, which means it applies multiple attack penalty. And they might not even succeed. That's what happens if the person critically succeeds the fort save. You don't even want to know what happens if they fail the fort save. 50 gold or something? 50, 60 gold. It scales. There's a lesser version, a major version, a greater version, but it's just like a It's like a scroll that you load into your gun. It's absolutely insane. Here, I'll tell you. Slow, the spell, the one that is just so busted and broken. If you critically fail slow, the spell, right? We all know slow's pretty nasty, right? If they critically succeed on a slow spell, they're fine. If they succeed, they're slowed 1 for 1 round. It's bad, but it's not too bad. But it's still great use, especially against a higher level opponent. If they fail the slow spell, they're slowed 1 for a minute. And if they critically fail the slow spell, they're slowed 2. So on a critical failure, they are slowed 2. Black Tendril Shot, guess what? If they fail the fort save, not critically fail, if they fail the fort save, they're slowed 2. What happens if they critically fail, you say? They're like slowed 2, blind, and something else. It's outrageous. And by the way, it's not for a round. It's not for a minute. It's until they escape. So yes, there is a world where you hit somebody with this and they fail the save, they're slowed 2, and then on their next turn, they make an escape tech, beat the DC, and now they're no longer slowed. But that just ate their entire round. The entire round. That's a stun 3 with no incap. It's insane. Anyways, Rules Lawyer covered that on a stream. I didn't actually go and watch that exact part of his stream because I'm curious to see like what their reaction was. I don't know the page number, but it's in the it's like in the shot, like the oh god, what's it called? The bullets, the ammunition. That's what it's called. Yes, it does have a static DC guitar guy, Nick, but there's greater versions of it. But the fact is like, even if the person succeeds, like they're still like getting slowed 1 for potentially multiple rounds. Like that's brutal. Like you just can't, it is on page, I don't know. Skunk Bomb is also pretty nasty, by the way. Yeah, I don't know what page it's on. Exactly, great role-playing dummy. Either way, it eats 2 actions, and that's the key thing. And that's at a minimum. And by the way, not only does it eat 2 actions, because the escape trait, or I'm sorry, the escape action has the attack trait, it increases multiple attack penalty. So even if they use 2, they lose 1 action to the slowed 1, then they lose an action to the escape. Sure, now they have a 3rd action which they could use to attack you, but their map is now at -5. Like that's that's brutal. I don't know how else to describe it. Like that's just really, really nasty. So it's pretty brutal. Anyways, won't get into the details of it, but you'll see it when it comes out. Yeah, I mean, it's still a great return on investment, especially against, if you're fighting a single higher level foe, which is where you would probably, mostly be doing that anyways. So, all right. Well, I didn't mean to get off on a Pathfinder 2 rant there, but there's going to be there's some good stuff in Treasure Vault, without offering a review. But I won't say anything more about it until, it's officially out, which I think it comes out next week. Kind of Bushy Beard says, I wish Paizo gave the same love to GMs as they do to the players. Well, kind of Bushy Beard, the problem there is players outnumber 22nd. Okay, that sounds right, Brutus. Players outnumber GMs like 5-1, 6-1, or something crazy. So if I make a book that is designed to appeal to GMs, then I'm going to sell 1x version of that book. If I make a book that is appealing to players, number one, the GM's probably going to buy it too, but you also might get 3 or 4 players in the group to buy the book. So it behooves publishers to make books that target players because there's just more of them. And so that's why you get much more focus on players than you do on, you know, GM type stuff. You obviously get things like the bestiaries, but you know, I think after Bestiary 1, 2, and 3, Paizo probably won't produce any more bestiaries. You got folks like Roll for Combat making, you know, Battle Zoo and stuff, but I don't think Paizo's going to do it. I don't think they will. Is anything going to be stealth errated pre-official release? I wouldn't imagine they would. So, I mean, Treasure Vault is kind of a GM book in the sense that, you know, you're using it to put treasure in the game, which you're going to give to your players. But I don't know what you mean by exactly by a GM book. I mean, by that definition, a bestiary is just full of monsters that are going to be used to attack the players. But they did state that Bestiary 3 was the last. Okay. Oh, and the PDF is already out to subscribers. Okay, so subscribers are at least are getting their PDFs. Well, that's good because, like I said, it is a silly. What's it called? Is it called Black Tendril? Is that the name of it? Black Tendril Shot or something? Don't know the name of it. Yeah, it's pretty nutty. There's a couple other things in there too. I think Nonat in his, I think he did the skunk bomb, and that thing is crazy too. That's an alchemist bomb that is just AoE sickened. Like that's nuts. Just an incredibly powerful item. So they're definitely doing some buffing there of certain classes, just through the equipment. So, anyways, well, guitar guy, Nick, I don't know. So it looks like there's not going to be any more bestiaries. So I guess the only thing we have to worry about there is the treasure vaults. And then for Mr. Great Role Playing Debbie, looks like that did not come through. So my heartfelt suggestion is that you definitely make a complaint, and Google will get that back to you very quickly. You definitely have to do that because I hate for you to get screwed out of your money, but I appreciate it all the same. How do we fix our weak classes? We just give them slow. And you know what? How rightfully they are. So that it tends to be pretty true. All right, everybody, it is going on 10 o'clock here, so we've gone an hour over tonight, but that's okay. We had a lot of fun, and we had some amazing and incredible support from all of you. Special thanks again to Darth Gorlock for going big there with a massive $100 in tips just to fill up that bottom tip jar all himself, so that we can keep talking about Blades in the Dark. Again, if the patrons want it and folks are supporting us, we're going to keep covering content. Thursday, you know what we're doing. You know where we be. Back here, doing archetypes. That's right, folks. We crushed through the M's and the N's and the O's. That ooze morph getting a surprise high roll. Now we're going to be on to the P's, which aren't too bad. Q's will be really quick. R's and S's, we're going to have a lot to go through. But then once we're through the R's and S's, we're in the home stretch. There's not that many. As we make our way all the way, I think, to Zombie might be the last one. Still, I don't know where we're at. Maybe 5 more archetypes streams to go through. You know, when I started that, I was like, oh, there's no way that this will ever be as long as the spell streams. But it's getting there. It really is. Brutus, thank you for showing up. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you to everybody who came in tonight. And thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell so that you know when we go live. Again, Tuesdays and Thursdays. But sometimes we do a bonus stream as well. And yeah, if you enjoy this conversation, you enjoy these fine people. So many of these wonderful people in chat are members of the Knights of the Last Call Patreon. I recommend you check us out. Patreon.com/Knights of the Last Call. Ton of amazing benefits that come with being a member of the channel, including access to our Discord. It's Patreon only. We have an active, thriving community gaming there. We have, I just counted today, actually, for GM Scott. We have 13 Foundry and Forge licenses. We have our own. We have 2 Forge servers just so people can custom run Foundries, which are available to community games to run. And starting probably next month, we're going to be starting up Northern Reaches Season 2. which of course is a follow-up to our massive, huge Pathfinder 2 community game, which ran last year, ran from about April to November. We had over 100 players. We had 20, 30, 25 GMs running dozens of games a week. Very, very, very fun. Persistent world, persistent characters, massive amount of fun. That's going to be starting up here probably in the next month. So it might be a cool idea to come on and get kind of ready for it. We've got bonus content. We've got exclusive streams and videos. So there's a lot of fun stuff. And really, though, you're doing it because you love this community, you love role-playing games, and you want to be part of the best gaming community out there. So that's us. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Thursday when we go and cover more archetypes. And until next time, I'll see you next time. Nice of last call. Yeah, we'll probably allow the shot.